Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Snoozy Scientist, where we wander gently through the mysteries of our world, one sleepy yawn at a time. Tonight, we're traveling back more than 100 million years to an age when giants ruled the earth. To most of us, the Mesozoic seems like a place owned entirely by dinosaurs, but deep within those ancient forests, under tangled roots and fallen branches, something else lived in the quiet, something smaller, stiller, and far easier to overlook. The earliest true snakes appeared far earlier than most people realize. Their lineage reaches back nearly 100 million years before T. Rex ever drew its first breath. And these early snakes were nothing like the small, shy creatures many imagine today. They were clever, capable hunters, with jaws that could open impossibly wide, teeth curved backward like tiny hooks, and flexible skulls more advanced than most of their reptile relatives. Evidence shows that even in their earliest chapters, they were already experimenting with hunting strategies that feel familiar today: the sudden stillness of an ambush, the crushing strength of constriction, and the uncanny ability to swallow prey that seemed far too large for their bodies. Across fossil sites on three different continents, scientists have uncovered subtle but unmistakable signs that some prehistoric snakes pushed their limits far beyond what modern snakes attempt. Their prey was larger, riskier, and they were far more ambitious. But if early snakes were capable of this, what else were they able to do in a world filled with the largest predators Earth has ever produced? Tonight, we drift gently into that forgotten world where dinosaurs were not the only hunters, and where some of the smallest predators carried dangers we're only just beginning to understand. But before we begin, if you enjoy these quiet journeys into deep time, calm, curious, and filled with wonder, I'd love it if you gave this video a soft like and maybe tapped subscribe. It helps more dreamers find their way to this peaceful little corner of science. And if you'd like, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And what time is it there? Now, take a deep breath, let your shoulders relax, and together let's step softly into the age when snakes hunted dinosaurs. When we picture the distant past, it is easy to imagine a world filled only with towering bodies and thunderous footsteps. Yet the Earth of the late Jurassic and early Cretaceous was far more intricate than a landscape ruled by size alone. It was a place shaped by warmth, moisture, and a calm patience that lingered in the air. The world was changing slowly, almost quietly, and in that softness, new forms of life began to take shape. During the late Jurassic, the continents were still gathered close together, though they had already begun their long separation. The landmass that once formed a single connected world stretched across the equator, catching sunlight for long hours. This created a climate that was warm, humid, and steady through much of the year. Instead of sharp seasonal changes, most regions experienced gentle shifts, with long wet periods and shorter times of dryness. The air held heat even into the night, wrapping forests and floodplains in a heavy stillness that never fully lifted. These forests were unlike the ones we know today. Their canopies were built from tall conifers that rose like ancient pillars, holding up a ceiling of dark green needles. Beneath them grew cycads with thick trunks and broad, stiff leaves that caught the filtered light. Ferns spread across the ground in wide carpets, thriving in the constant dampness. In many places, the forest floor was hidden under layers of fallen branches, rotting wood, and deep leaf litter. The world was rich with shadows and narrow spaces, quiet corners and sheltered ground, and very little sunlight ever touched the soil directly. As the early Cretaceous arrived, a subtle transformation began. Small flowering plants appeared for the first time. They did not yet dominate the landscape, but their presence changed the texture of the world. Delicate leaves, lighter shades of green, and small blossoms added variety to the once uniform forests. Along rivers and lake edges, these new plants formed patches of low vegetation, attracting insects and small animals that had never encountered such food before. This gentle botanical shift opened doors that had been closed for millions of years. The air above these forests shimmered with life. Giant dragonflies drifted through the warm light, their wings catching the sun in slow rhythmic beats. Beetles crawled beneath rotting logs, searching for fungi and decaying bark. Ants were beginning to form early colonies, moving in winding trails across the forest floor. Crickets and early grasshoppers filled the nights with soft vibrations. The insect world had already become diverse and abundant, providing a steady source of prey for any creature small enough and patient enough to take advantage of it. Among the leaves and roots lived the earliest mammals. They were tiny, no larger than modern shrews or mice. Most of them lived in the unseen hours of night, venturing out only when the forest grew still and the heat eased. Their bodies were fragile in a world filled with giants, so they survived by staying quick, quiet, and hidden. These mammals did not yet rise to dominance, but they carried the seeds of a future that would unfold long after the age of dinosaurs ended. For now, they were simply part of the background, slipping through tunnels, nesting in hollows, and feeding on insects beneath the canopy. This world offered something rare: stability. Warmth remained consistent, allowing reptiles to thrive without needing to expend energy on keeping their bodies heated. The deep litter on the forest floor created countless hiding places, from narrow gaps beneath roots to soft soil that could be pushed aside. Burrows and fallen trees provided shelter from larger predators. The dim lighting beneath the canopy softened movement and sound, turning every shadow into a place of safety. In such an environment, a creature that preferred silence over speed and patience over strength would find opportunity. The forests were layered, from the high treetops down through tangled branches and into the darkness beneath the leaves. Many animals lived above ground, but only a few explored the spaces below. The underbrush was thick and tangled, yet the world immediately beneath it was open, cool, and shaded. It was a place where a slender body could move without being noticed. Every root and hollow offered a pathway that larger creatures could not use. The soil was soft enough to be pushed aside. The temperature stayed warm enough to support long periods of rest and digestion. Prey came in many sizes, from insect swarms to young reptiles and newly hatched animals. Floods and gentle seasonal rains refreshed the land, washing nutrients into low areas and keeping vegetation dense. All of it formed a quiet network of hidden spaces that encouraged stillness, ambush, and subtle movement. Over time, as the early Cretaceous continued, the forests grew even more complex. Rivers meandered through wide floodplains, leaving behind pools and muddy banks where life gathered. Low plants spread along these damp edges, drawing small animals into the open. Fallen logs became bridges across shallow water, and beneath them lay pockets of darkness that never fully dried. It was a world that rewarded those who waited and punished those who rushed. In this calm and shaded realm, early snakes found their place. They did not need size or speed to survive. The world beneath the giants offered safety, opportunity, and quiet paths where a slender body could thrive unnoticed. The ancient forests did not simply allow their arrival, they shaped it, gently guiding their evolution as the earth continued its slow and patient transformation. Long before snakes took their silent place beneath ancient forests, the world was filled with small reptiles that moved on four legs. They were quick and alert, lifting their bodies slightly above the ground as they searched for insects and shelter. Their lives were spent in sunlight and shade, never very far from the surface. Yet among these ordinary forms, something subtle began to change. It did not happen in a moment. It unfolded slowly across countless generations as the earth shifted and new opportunities appeared. Some of these early reptiles started spending more time close to the ground, pressing their bodies lower as they slipped beneath fallen branches and into loose soil. Their limbs were useful on open ground, but inside tight spaces, those same limbs became obstacles. Every elbow, every knee caught against roots and stones. A creature with a long, narrow body could move more easily through a hidden world that larger animals ignored. What began as an occasional behavior gradually became a way of life. Over time, the bodies of these reptiles stretched, vertebrae multiplied, forming a spine made of many repeating segments. Each segment carried its own set of muscles and ribs, allowing movement that was smooth and controlled. Instead of relying on legs to push forward, the entire body became the engine of motion. Waves traveled beneath the skin, shifting gently from head to tail. This style of movement allowed the animal to glide through narrow gaps without disturbing the world above. The limbs did not disappear all at once. They became smaller with each new generation, shrinking little by little as they became less necessary. For millions of years, these early snake ancestors lived in a state between two forms. They still carried the faint outline of legs near the end of their bodies, though the limbs were no longer used for walking. Fossils reveal tiny bones tucked beneath the skin, quiet reminders of an earlier shape. Eventually, even these traces faded in most species, leaving only a smooth outline from head to tail. The gradual loss of limbs was not a flaw, it was an advantage that matched the environment they had chosen. Without legs, the body could press close to the ground, slipping under soft soil or into the spaces beneath leaves. A creature that moved without footsteps could approach prey without warning. Silence became its greatest strength. As their bodies changed, the skull also began to transform. The bones of the head no longer fused tightly together. They developed flexible joints connected by strong but elastic tissues. This allowed the mouth to open wider than expected, giving the animal access to food that would have been impossible for other reptiles of similar size. The lower jaw was no longer a single solid structure. It was divided into two halves joined in the center by a stretch of tough ligaments. When feeding, those halves could move slightly apart, increasing the space available for swallowing. Inside the mouth, the teeth curved gently backward. They were not designed for chewing. Instead, they acted like tiny hooks that held struggling prey in place. Once caught, escape became almost impossible. The animal did not need to rush, it simply waited, using patience as its final tool. The tongue changed as well. It split at the tip, forming two slender points that could read the world in delicate detail. Each flick gathered traces of scent from the air or the ground. These signals were carried to a specialized pocket inside the mouth that processed them like a map. Through this quiet sense, early snakes could detect the direction of nearby animals without relying on sight alone. They did not need to chase. They only needed to know where to wait. The spine grew stronger and more complex. Tiny joints between the vertebrae allowed bending in many directions while still protecting the delicate cord inside. Muscles along the length of the body worked together like a braided rope. This strength made it possible to anchor against the ground, hold still for long periods, and strike with sudden precision. Even without limbs, these animals were not limited. They became specialists in stillness, using the shape of their bodies to control the space around them. As their anatomy changed, their behavior shifted with it. They no longer depended on speed across open ground. Instead, they became experts at using shadows, debris, and silence. They waited beside burrows and hidden paths where small animals traveled without caution. They learned to blend into their surroundings, letting time pass until opportunity arrived. These changes did not create snakes overnight. They guided a quiet transformation that stretched across ages. From lizard like ancestors with four legs came creatures adapted for a world beneath notice. Their bodies grew long, their limbs faded, their skulls became instruments of flexibility and control. Nothing about this journey was rushed. It followed the slow rhythm of evolution, shaped by the landscape and the hidden spaces that offered safety and food. By the time true snakes emerged, they were already well suited for a life built on patience. Their form was not the result of sudden innovation. It was the final step in a long and gentle transition that turned ordinary reptiles into masters of stealth, prepared for a world that rewarded silence and the art of remaining unseen. In the quiet spaces beneath ancient forests, early snakes lived in a world that most creatures never noticed. Their bodies were shaped for stillness and silence, but their success depended on something even more remarkable. They needed to understand their surroundings without relying on the senses that guided other animals. Sight alone was not enough in places where light barely reached the ground. Sound could be swallowed by thick vegetation. To survive, these early snakes learned to read the world through subtler signals. Their eyes were small and simple compared to the sharp vision of many reptiles that lived above the forest floor. They did not need to track distant shapes or chase prey across open ground. Instead, their eyes were adapted for close spaces and low light. The pupils widened to catch what little brightness slipped between the leaves. Movement became more important than detail, a shift of shadow, the gentle flutter of something living. These faint cues were all they required to remain aware without revealing their presence. Yet vision was only one part of their perception. Early snakes relied on a sense that worked beyond sight. The tongue, long and slender, flicked through the air in slow repetitions. Each flick gathered tiny particles that floated unseen. When the tongue returned to the mouth, these particles were pressed against a hidden chamber in the roof of the mouth. Here, chemical traces were sorted and interpreted, creating a picture made not of light, but of scent. The world that formed through this sense was richer than anything the eye could offer. Trails lingered long after the creatures that made them had passed, paths crossed even when nothing moved. Through this chemical map, early snakes could recognize the difference between prey and predator, between fresh movement and fading history. The air and soil held stories that could be read without leaving a sound. This ability allowed snakes to make decisions slowly and safely, conserving energy in a world where patience could mean survival. As time passed, another sense began to deepen. Snakes pressed their bodies close to the ground, and through that contact, subtle vibrations traveled along their length. The soil acted as a wide, continuous instrument, carrying tremors from faraway steps or wings striking the earth. Most animals heard through the air. Early snakes listened through the ground. They detected the approach of small mammals or lizards without needing to raise their heads. A single tremor could tell them whether to remain still or slip quietly into a safer place. This sensitivity did not require external ears. Instead, bones inside the skull transmitted vibrations directly to the inner ear. The entire body became part of the listening process, turning stillness into awareness. With no need to look or breathe loudly, early snakes learned to disappear into their surroundings while remaining fully alert. As forests grew thicker and nights stayed warm, many animals shifted their activity into the darker hours. Early snakes followed this rhythm. Night offered protection from larger predators that relied on vision. Cooler temperatures allowed reptiles to conserve energy. The forest at night was not silent, only softer. Leaves rustled with insects. Small animals moved along familiar routes, trusting the darkness to hide them. Early snakes took advantage of this world. Their eyes adjusted to dim light, letting them sense motion without needing full clarity. Their tongues gathered chemical traces that remained in the air long after the trail maker had passed. Their bodies felt the low, distant tremble of tiny footsteps. Together, these senses formed a kind of three-dimensional awareness that worked even when sight failed. Much later in snake evolution, some lineages developed organs that detected heat. These were small pits on the head that could sense the warmth of living bodies. Modern pit vipers and pythons use these organs to locate prey in total darkness. The earliest snakes did not yet possess such complex features, but the foundation for this ability began during the time when forests were warm and full of life. Temperature mattered in every part of snake biology. Warmth allowed muscles to move. Warmth determined how quickly food could be digested. Early snakes were already sensitive to shifts in heat, even before specialized organs appeared. This sensitivity may have been simple at first. A snake could tell when the air near the ground cooled after sunset. It could sense when a small animal warmed the soil as it rested. These faint differences helped early snakes choose when to hunt and when to conserve energy. Over millions of years, such advantages added up. What began as a general awareness eventually evolved into one of the most precise sensory systems known among reptiles. Night hunting became more common as early snakes discovered that darkness favored their approach. Moving slowly along the forest floor, they blended into a world that no longer relied on color or brightness. The lack of limbs reduced accidental noise. The body curved and shifted with the ground instead of stepping over it. A single moment of stillness could last until the perfect opportunity passed within reach. In this quiet existence, early snakes were never blind or helpless. They simply perceived their surroundings differently. They read the world through scent, vibration, temperature, and motion. Their senses worked together like overlapping circles, creating a complete picture without needing the sharp vision of daytime hunters. Slowly, their relationship with the environment deepened. The forest no longer needed to be visible for it to be understood. Every leaf, every patch of loose soil held information. Early snakes became experts at moving through a world that rewarded awareness over speed. As the nights stretched across ancient landscapes and the earth continued its slow rhythm, these abilities allowed early snakes to survive in places where many other creatures could not. Their senses formed the foundation of a life built on patience, silence, and the quiet reading of the world around them. By the time early snakes began to move with confidence through the shaded world beneath ancient forests, their bodies had already taken on a form suited for silence. Yet one of the most extraordinary changes was not found along the length of the spine or in the fading memory of limbs. It happened in the head, where feeding shifted from something ordinary into something almost unbelievable. This transformation took place slowly, shaped by necessity and patience, until early snakes gained a way of eating that no other reptile could match. Most reptiles of the ancient world fed in simple and familiar ways. Lizards used teeth to bite and hold, tearing food into manageable pieces before swallowing. Their jaws moved up and down in a firm hinge, strong but limited. Early snakes, however, followed a different path. The bones of their skull began to loosen and separate, creating new possibilities where older reptiles reached their limits. In the beginning, the change was subtle. The lower jaw, which in many animals forms a single solid structure, began to divide into two separate halves. These halves remained connected at the front, but the joint was no longer rigid. Instead, a stretch of tough, flexible tissue held them together. This tissue acted like a natural bridge, allowing slight movement from side to side. At first, the advantage may have been small. It offered a little extra room, just enough to adjust around irregularly shaped prey. But in evolution, small advantages can open doors that lead to remarkable possibilities. As the bones continued to change, the skull developed a feature known as kinesis. Instead of acting as a fixed box of bone, the skull gained joints that allowed controlled motion. Sections of the upper jaw could shift independently, guided by thin ligaments that stretched without tearing. When an early snake opened its mouth, the motion was not limited by a single hinge. The entire skull became an instrument of expansion, widening not only downward but outward. The ligaments that held the skull together were strong and elastic. They acted like bands that could stretch during feeding and return to their original length afterward. This elasticity allowed a snake to open its mouth far wider than its resting shape would suggest. Muscles along the head and neck worked in rhythm, pulling gently and evenly to guide prey into the throat. There was no need for tearing, no need for chewing. Swallowing became a slow and deliberate process, supported by anatomy designed for patience. Inside the mouth, the teeth played their own role. They curved backward in graceful arcs, forming hooks that prevented escape. Each tooth was small, yet together they worked like a series of anchors. When prey struggled, these teeth guided it farther inward rather than letting it slip away. Early snakes did not bite in order to crush, they bit in order to hold. Their feeding strategy depended not on force, but on control. The throat and upper body also adapted to this new style of eating. Muscles that lined the esophagus became powerful and coordinated. Once prey passed the jaws, these muscles moved in waves, slowly drawing the meal deeper without the need for limbs. The ribs near the front of the body widened and narrowed in gentle patterns, helping to shift food while still allowing the snake to breathe. Even the internal organs rearranged to accommodate meals that arrived whole, rather than in pieces. The most astonishing result of these changes was the ability to swallow prey larger than the diameter of the snake's own body. At first glance, such a feat seems impossible, yet the body did not stretch like a balloon. Instead, each scale, ligament, and muscle shifted slightly, sharing the strain across the length of the snake. The skin was loose enough to expand without tearing, and the ribs could spread apart like the slats of a flexible frame. Nothing about this process was rushed. A meal could take hours to move from the mouth to the stomach. For early snakes, this ability offered a powerful advantage. They could take prey that other reptiles ignored, especially animals that appeared too large or too risky for creatures of similar size. A single successful meal could sustain a snake for days or even weeks, reducing the need to hunt frequently. In a world where movement carried danger, the ability to feed infrequently was a gift. These anatomical shifts did more than change how early snakes ate. They shaped how they lived. A creature that could swallow large prey no longer needed to chase small animals across open ground. It could wait beside hidden pathways, conserving energy until the perfect moment arrived. The jaws that opened wide also closed quietly, leaving no trace except the stillness that followed. The evolution of snake feeding was not driven by a single event. It unfolded over millions of years, guided by the quiet demands of life beneath the canopy. Every change in bone and ligament allowed another step toward a future where snakes would become some of the most adaptable predators on Earth. Their skulls became instruments of patience, their jaws a doorway to opportunities that no other reptile could reach. In this gentle transformation, early snakes discovered a way of feeding that matched their silent approach to the world. The impossible became ordinary, and the ordinary became extraordinary, carried forward through time by creatures that learned to eat without haste and survive without being seen. Long before the world met Titanoboa in the warm aftermath of the dinosaurs' extinction, there were other snakes that grew far larger than anything imagined for their time. Their bones are rare and scattered, often found in pieces rather than complete skeletons, yet each fragment tells a quiet story about a lineage experimenting with size long before the world changed. Most early snakes were small, slender creatures that lived within the safety of shadows and soil. They relied on hidden spaces, patience, and narrow pathways beneath ancient forests. But as the Cretaceous period unfolded, some snakes began to drift toward a different path. Their bodies lengthened beyond the modest sizes of their ancestors, and a few reached lengths that would have seemed astonishing in a world where they shared space with dinosaurs. The fossils of these early giants belong to groups known today only through fragments of vertebrae and ribs. They are often placed within ancient families like the Madsoids, a group that stretched across several continents. These snakes lived during the late Cretaceous and into the early age that followed. Their bones have been found in regions that are now South America, Africa, Australia, and parts of India, though during the Cretaceous, these lands were assembled in very different arrangements. Even from limited remains, paleontologists can learn much about their size. The vertebrae of these snakes were thick and robust, showing deep muscle attachments. The width of the spine suggests bodies far bulkier than the small, delicate forms that came before. Some of these early giants may have stretched more than several meters, with thick torsos built for strength rather than speed. Although not as enormous as Titanoboa, they were giants of their time and occupied a unique place in ancient ecosystems. Growing large affected every part of their lives. A small snake can hide beneath a handful of leaves. A large one must choose different strategies. Size brings power, but it also brings limitation. These early giant snakes could no longer slip unnoticed into narrow burrows or coil beneath small roots. Instead, they relied more heavily on patience and on the landscape itself. Fallen logs, deep riverbanks, and dense thickets provided natural coverings where a large body could remain unseen. A giant snake does not chase, it waits. Its strength lies not in speed, but in the force of its muscles and the surprise of its strike. Larger bodies generate powerful constriction, enough to subdue animals that smaller snakes could never manage. Fossil evidence suggests that these early giants targeted medium-sized prey, possibly including young dinosaurs, crocodile-like reptiles, and large mammals that appeared after the Cretaceous ended. Their size allowed them to take larger meals less frequently. A single successful hunt could sustain them for long stretches of time. Environmental pressures played a major role in shaping this growth. During the late Cretaceous, many regions experienced warm climates that remained steady year after year. Reptiles thrive in environments where temperature supports their metabolism. Warmth allows their bodies to function efficiently without expending excess energy. In such climates, a large snake can survive while moving slowly and digesting gradually. Dense vegetation and widespread wetlands offered additional advantages. Forests and floodplains created habitats rich with prey, providing the resources necessary for large predators to evolve. Where food is limited, small bodies are favored. Where food is abundant and competition is balanced, large bodies can appear. Some of these early giants may have lived near rivers that flooded seasonally, leaving behind stranded animals or nesting grounds that offered opportunities for ambush. Another influence came from the absence or decline of certain predators. In some regions, large carnivorous dinosaurs were less common in the final chapters of the Cretaceous, leaving space for other hunters to rise. Snakes, with their quiet approach and efficient energy use, could take advantage of these openings. Over long stretches of time, natural selection favored individuals that grew slightly larger and lived slightly longer. These small differences accumulated until an entirely new scale of snake existed. Gigantism is not simply a matter of body length. It affects every part of life. A larger snake moves differently. It feels vibrations in deeper tones. It conserves energy more carefully and must choose its resting places with greater precision. Even breathing becomes a coordinated effort, using strong muscles and flexible ribs to support the weight of its own body. The fossils of the first giant snakes do not reveal their colors or patterns, nor the exact way they moved through ancient landscapes. But the bones that remain show that the world was already experimenting with size long before Titanoboa appeared. These early giants represent a quiet chapter in snake evolution, one shaped by warmth, abundance, and the slow rhythm of opportunity. Their presence reminds us that life often tests new possibilities in silence. In hidden corners of deep time, long before the world reset and forests changed, snakes were already learning how to become something more than small and unseen. They grew larger not through sudden leaps, but through patient adaptation, guided by the environments that provided both shelter and challenge. As the Cretaceous period continued, these early giants lived their lives in the steady warmth of ancient ecosystems, leaving behind only scattered traces for us to find. Their bones speak softly across millions of years, offering a glimpse into a world where snakes first learned that size itself could become a powerful form of survival. In the ancient world, where early snakes learned to move in silence and wait with patience, not every creature faced the same level of danger. The largest dinosaurs walked through their habitats with little concern, their size alone acting as a shield. Yet within the same landscapes lived animals far more fragile. Some were small enough to disappear beneath foliage with a single step. Others were young and unsteady, only beginning their slow journey toward adulthood. And many gathered in nesting grounds where life began in great numbers but survived only through chance. Among the most vulnerable were the small-bodied dinosaurs. These creatures came in many forms, from quick insect hunters to gentle leaf eaters that moved through low vegetation. Their bones were light and delicate, and their bodies rarely stretched beyond a meter or two in length. They depended on awareness and speed, but even swift movements could not always protect them from a predator that relied on stillness rather than pursuit. Small dinosaurs often lived close to the ground, sharing space with insects, early mammals, and reptiles. They fed along riverbanks, forest edges, and open clearings where low plants formed a thin cover. Unlike larger species that towered above the landscape, these smaller forms could not rely on height to scout for danger. Their world was made of close horizons and sudden surprises, a shadow that shifted in the leaves, a faint movement where none should be. For a snake, these moments were opportunities that required no effort beyond waiting. Some of these small dinosaurs traveled in groups, which offered protection against certain predators but not against one that could strike from beneath. A single misplaced step near a hidden body could bring the encounter to an end before the victim ever understood the threat. Fossils from different regions show that small dinosaurs were abundant throughout the Cretaceous, and abundance itself increases risk. Where prey is common, a patient predator can remain in one place without ever needing to move far. Even more vulnerable were the youngest members of the largest species. Juvenile sauropods, born into a world where their future size promised safety, spent their earliest months without the protection that adulthood would provide. As hatchlings, they were hardly larger than a medium-sized bird. Their necks were short, their limbs unsteady, and their bodies soft compared to the massive frames they would later develop. A fully grown sauropod could sweep aside threats with a single movement of its tail, but its newly hatched young had no such defenses. These juveniles often remained near nesting sites or within the shelter of vegetation while adults moved to feed. The gap between birth and growth was long. During that time, the young relied on their surroundings rather than their strength. Any predator able to approach quietly would find them within reach. Early snakes did not need to overpower an adult giant. They only needed to exploit the earliest and most fragile stage of life, Nesting species created additional opportunities. Many dinosaurs returned to the same places year after year, laying their eggs in broad colonies. Some dug shallow pits, others built mounded nests or arranged their eggs in circular patterns. The nesting grounds were often open, warmed by sunlight, and positioned near sources of water. These choices supported the development of embryos, but they also made the sites predictable. Eggs offered no defense at all. They remained motionless and silent, relying on the presence of adults to keep them safe. If a moment came when adults were absent or distracted, the nest became vulnerable. Shells could hold the beginnings of creatures that would one day grow to impressive size. Yet during those first stages, they were as defenseless as seeds lying on the ground. Not all parents guarded their nests closely. Some laid eggs and left them to hatch without supervision. Others remained nearby but could not stay awake through every hour. Even the most attentive species faced challenges. A sudden storm, a shift in wind, or the arrival of another predator could break the rhythm of protection. In those small gaps of time, a snake needed only to move a short distance to reach a meal. The habits of nesting species also created patterns that predators could learn. If eggs were laid in clusters, or if hatchlings emerged in groups, scent and movement increased sharply for a brief period. A snake that understood these cycles did not need to search constantly. It needed only to remember. Certain dinosaur groups were at greater risk because of their size, behavior, or developmental stages. Small herbivores that lived in dense vegetation could be ambushed easily. Young sauropods remained exposed until their growth carried them beyond danger. Ground nesting species concentrated life in a single area rather than spreading it widely. Even the shape of bodies affected vulnerability. Animals with short limbs and low profiles were more likely to remain within striking range for longer moments. The risk was not equal across the ancient world. Some species lived in dry environments with sparse cover, where hiding places were limited and predators were more easily seen. Others lived in forests, where the ground remained shaded and full of shelter. Where darkness and stillness ruled, snakes found the most success. In this quiet balance of life, early snakes did not dominate through strength or speed. They survived by entering the spaces where other animals were least protected. Small dinosaurs, young giants, and unguarded nests formed the delicate threads that tied their existence to the world around them. And within those threads, patience shaped the outcome as surely as any physical force. For a long time, the idea that snakes once fed on dinosaurs existed only as possibility. Early snakes lived in the shadows of giants, and their bodies rarely preserved in the fossil record. The earth does not easily keep moments of predation. Bones scatter, soft tissue vanishes, and most interactions disappear before they can be buried. Yet in one place, a scene remained untouched for millions of years. It captured not a guess or a suggestion, but a frozen moment between predator and prey. This discovery came from western India, in rocks that formed during the late Cretaceous. The region was once part of a floodplain, where rivers overflowed their banks and laid down layers of fine sediment. In this landscape, a clutch of titanosaur eggs rested in shallow chambers. Titanosaurs were among the largest dinosaurs that ever lived, yet their young began life at a size that made them vulnerable. Near one of these eggs, paleontologists uncovered the remains of a small hatchling that had recently emerged. Coiled beside it was the skeleton of a snake now known as Sanaja. The name means ancient gape, a reference to its wide feeding capabilities, though the snake itself was not enormous. It stretched a little over 3 meters in length, long enough to overpower small animals, but far smaller than the giant species that appeared after the age of dinosaurs. What made Sanaje remarkable was not its size, but its position. The snake's body lay curved around the hatchling, close enough that the two had clearly interacted at the moment of death. The fossil was preserved with unusual clarity. Bones of the hatchling were arranged as if the young dinosaur had collapsed in place, rather than being moved by scavengers or water. The snake's vertebrae and ribs remained mostly connected, forming a gentle arc near the nest. The sediment surrounding the fossils suggested that the area was rapidly buried, likely during a sudden event such as a flood or collapse of wet soil. This rapid burial sealed the scene before decay could scatter it. Paleontologists studying the fossil looked closely for signs that might distinguish coincidence from interaction. If the snake had simply died near the nest, its body would likely have shown a more relaxed posture or a position inconsistent with feeding behavior. Instead, the curve of its body resembled a loose coil, a shape seen in modern snakes that prepare to restrain or swallow prey. The placement of the snake, relative to the hatchling, suggested proximity during life rather than chance arrangement after death. The bones of the hatchling told a similar story. There were no marks of teeth or crushing, but the skeleton appeared incomplete in a way consistent with interruption. It had not been scavenged over time. It seemed to have been caught in the first moments of danger. Together, these details pointed toward predation rather than coincidence. To reach this conclusion, researchers compared the fossil with behavior seen in living snakes. Many modern species wait near nests of birds or reptiles, positioned close enough to strike when young emerge. They do not destroy the eggs themselves, but remain nearby until the hatchlings break free. A similar strategy could explain the presence of Sanaja so close to newly opened eggs. The size of the young dinosaur, roughly equal to prey taken by modern constrictors of similar length, made the interaction biologically plausible. The skull of Sanaja, studied through detailed imaging, revealed features that supported its role as an ambitious feeder. Its jaws were more flexible than those of most early snakes, and its teeth curved backward in a pattern suited for gripping struggling prey. Though its feeding structures were not as advanced as those found in later species, they allowed it to swallow animals larger than one might expect for its body size. These anatomical traits aligned well with the scene preserved in stone. The surrounding site contained multiple snake fossils within nesting grounds, suggesting that this was not an isolated behavior. Rather than roaming widely, these snakes may have returned to nesting areas during specific seasons, much like certain predators do today. The nest provided opportunity without the risk of chasing prey across open terrain. For a snake that relied on patience, the strategy was efficient. It only needed to remain in place until a hatchling appeared. The Sanaja fossil also offered insight into the broader relationship between snakes and dinosaurs. It showed that ancient snakes were not limited to insects or tiny reptiles. They already occupied a higher position in the food web than many had assumed. Their role was subtle but real. They influenced the survival of certain species not through overwhelming power, but through quiet persistence at the earliest stages of life. What makes this fossil extraordinary is not only what it preserves, but what it reveals. It captures a rare moment when two lives crossed paths in a way that shaped their shared environment. Most of prehistory exists as fragments, scattered across time. Here, a single event remained intact, protected by chance, and buried under the patient work of sediment. In the quiet layers of stone, the bones still rest as they were found, a young dinosaur, new to the world, a snake, waiting beside the nest. Their story endures as one of the clearest windows into a hidden chapter of ancient life, showing that even in an age ruled by giants, danger often came from the ground beneath their feet. Across the ancient landscapes of the Cretaceous, there were places where life gathered in great concentration. These were not feeding grounds or watering sites, but the quiet spaces where new generations began. Dinosaur nests were scattered across open plains, riverbanks, and the edges of forests. From a distance, they seemed peaceful. The soil was warmed by sunlight, the air still, and the ground patterned with shallow hollows that held fragile shells. Yet beneath this calm surface, these nesting grounds were some of the most dangerous places in the ancient world. Many dinosaurs did not lay their eggs in isolation. They returned to the same areas year after year, forming wide colonies that stretched across the land. The ground in these places was often soft and dry, making it easier to dig shallow pits. Some species arranged their eggs in careful circles. Others buried them beneath loose sediment or covered them with vegetation to retain heat. Each strategy reflected a different balance of risk and protection. These nesting grounds created moments of intense vulnerability. Eggs remained still for long periods, unable to flee or defend themselves. Even after hatching, the young emerged unsteady and unaware, having never seen the dangers that waited beyond the shell. In nature, any resource that remains in one place for long enough becomes a beacon. For predators, these sites were predictable, concentrated, and rich. Many different animals learned to exploit them. Small mammals, though rare in number, were clever and opportunistic. They dug beneath the surface to reach eggs or waited for hatchlings to emerge. Their teeth were sharp enough to breach thin shells, and their small size allowed them to slip into nests unseen. Certain birds that lived during this time also fed on exposed eggs, picking through open sites where adults were absent. Larger reptiles joined the competition. Crocodile relatives that lived near rivers could move onto land during nesting seasons. They did not need to travel far. A single visit to a nesting site could provide enough food to last through long stretches of stillness. Even some dinosaurs preyed upon the eggs of other species. In ecosystems where survival required constant advantage, no opportunity went to waste. With so many predators searching for the same resource, nesting grounds became scenes of quiet conflict. Not every threat arrived with noise or speed. Among the least visible participants were the ancient snakes that had already learned the benefits of patience. They did not steal eggs by breaking shells from above. Instead, they waited for the moment when life transitioned from stillness into motion. Snakes did not need to uncover nests or dig through soil. Their slim bodies allowed them to slip into small gaps left by roots or loose sediment. A single coil beneath scattered leaves could go unnoticed for hours or days. They used the structure of the nest itself as shelter, taking advantage of shade and warmth without altering the surroundings. Unlike predators that searched constantly, snakes let the nest come to life around them. This strategy depended on timing. Eggs remained sealed for long periods, protected by their stillness. But when the hatching process began, cracks formed in the shells and scents changed. The young inside shifted as oxygen increased and muscles stretched. These faint signals were too subtle for most animals to detect. For a snake pressed against the earth, every vibration carried meaning. A quiver beneath the soil, a slight change in temperature, a whisper of motion before the shell opened. When the hatchlings emerged, they were small enough to be swallowed whole. Their bones were soft and their bodies fragile. Even species destined to reach enormous size began life in a state that offered no defense. Some hatchlings remained near the nest while waiting for their limbs to strengthen. Others instinctively scattered, hoping that movement alone would increase their chances. For the snake, either choice could lead to opportunity. Nest colonies increased the likelihood of success. Where one nest held only a handful of eggs, a colony could contain hundreds spread across a single area. A snake that found such a site did not need to roam widely. Remaining still became an effective hunting strategy. Each new hatching season repeated the cycle, providing food in predictable waves. For early snakes that relied on conserving energy, such consistency shaped survival. The presence of multiple predators created another advantage. Larger hunters sometimes disturbed nests, breaking open eggs or scattering hatchlings. In the confusion that followed, smaller animals could seize their chance. Snakes were not the first to arrive, nor did they need to be. They benefited from the aftermath, where movement replaced stillness and the ground shifted with tiny bodies. Not all nesting grounds were equal in danger. Some species defended their young more aggressively. Parents remained near the nest, using size or numbers to discourage intrusion. But even strong defenses could falter. A momentary absence, a change in weather, a distraction caused by another predator. Nature rarely protects every life equally. In these overlooked battlegrounds, snakes were silent participants. They did not rely on claws or speed. Their success came from blending into the environment that sustained the very creatures they hunted. Nests created life in abundance, and abundance created risk. Through patience and awareness, early snakes learned to occupy the thin space between safety and vulnerability, shaping their place in a world that seldom offered protection without cost. Long before snakes grew large enough to threaten young dinosaurs, they relied on patience and silence to survive. Their bodies had already become flexible, their jaws capable of swallowing prey without tearing. But another change began to shape their future, one that did not depend on speed or venom. It came from the gradual strengthening of their muscles and the slow refinement of how they used their bodies. Over millions of years, this quiet transformation led to one of the most effective hunting strategies in the animal world: constriction. In the earliest stages of snake evolution, feeding was limited by size. Small prey could be swallowed whole, but anything larger risked injury or escape. Snakes that held their prey more securely had a greater chance of survival. At first, this grip may have been simple, nothing more than the body pressing lightly against a struggling animal to keep it in place. The earliest forms of constriction were likely gentle, a way to prevent prey from slipping free before swallowing began. As time passed, the bodies of some snakes grew longer and stronger. Individual vertebrae developed larger surfaces where muscles could attach. These muscles extended in overlapping layers along the spine, forming a powerful system that could tighten with precision. With each generation, snakes that used their bodies more effectively to restrain prey gained an advantage. The shift did not appear suddenly, nor did it spread evenly across all snake lineages. It emerged slowly, shaped by the environments where snakes hunted and the types of prey available. Fossil evidence for constriction does not come from soft tissue, which almost never preserves. Instead, scientists examine bones for clues. The vertebrae of certain ancient snakes show features associated with strong muscular development. Thickened ridges and enlarged attachment points suggest that these snakes used their bodies for more than simple movement. Some of these fossils belong to groups that lived during the late Cretaceous and into the Paleogene, long after dinosaurs first appeared, but still part of the ancient world that shaped snake evolution. Biomechanical studies allow researchers to estimate how these muscles may have functioned. By comparing fossil vertebrae with those of modern constrictors, scientists look for patterns that indicate similar behavior. The spacing between vertebrae can reveal how flexible the spine was. The length and curve of ribs can suggest how much the body could expand or tighten. While fossils cannot show the full picture, the similarities are strong enough to indicate that constriction had already begun before the most famous giant snakes appeared. Modern researchers also study how constriction works in living species to understand its origins. For many years, people believed that constriction killed prey by crushing bones or suffocating the lungs. Recent studies have revealed a more precise mechanism. When a snake wraps its coils around an animal, it applies pressure at the moment the prey exhales. Each tightening reduces the space available for the next breath. Within seconds, the blood flow to vital organs slows. The heart cannot push blood against the increasing pressure. Oxygen drops rapidly, and the prey loses consciousness long before the bones are damaged. This process is efficient and controlled. A constricting snake does not squeeze continuously. It tightens only when needed, using feedback from the struggling body to apply pressure in subtle adjustments. Muscles contract in a coordinated pattern along the length of the snake, forming a series of loops that share the effort. The goal is not brute strength, but precision. The snake releases only after the prey becomes still, ensuring safety without wasting energy. Early snakes that developed even a basic form of constriction would have gained several important advantages. They could subdue prey that lacked sharp defenses, but was too large to hold with the mouth alone. They could feed on animals that struggled fiercely, reducing the risk of injury. In environments where predators relied on sudden movement, a strategy based on patience and controlled force offered a different path to success. Constriction also changed how snakes interacted with their surroundings. A snake that subdued prey without venom or high speed did not need to expose itself during the hunt. It could wait in a hidden position, strike when the prey moved close, and finish the process without leaving the safety of its shelter. This matched the world beneath dense vegetation, where shadows were deep and movement was limited. It also fit the rhythms of animals that remained active during the night, when visibility was low and silence favored those who did not rush. Not all ancient snakes used constriction. Even today, many species rely on different strategies. Some use venom to immobilize prey. Others feed on animals that do not require restraint. The evolution of constriction was not a universal step, but one of several possible solutions that nature explored. Its success came from the environments where it proved most effective and the prey that made it worthwhile. Over time, constriction became more refined. The snakes that practiced it grew stronger and more specialized. Their bodies became engines of controlled pressure, capable of holding and releasing with remarkable subtlety. This ability did not transform snakes into dominant predators, but it allowed them to thrive in places where other hunters could not follow. In the quiet spaces of ancient Earth, constriction emerged not as an act of force, but as an adaptation shaped by patience. It turned the simple act of holding into a method of survival, carried forward through countless generations until it became one of the signature traits of some of the most remarkable snakes in the world. As early snakes continued to refine their silent approach to hunting, not all of them relied only on muscle and patience. In some lineages, a different kind of adaptation began to unfold within the body rather than along its surface. It did not change the way a snake moved or the shape of its skull. Instead, it altered the chemistry hidden beneath the skin, turning saliva into something far more powerful. The first hints of venom appeared long before snakes became familiar predators in the modern world. Its origins can be traced back to early members of the larger reptile group that includes lizards. These distant ancestors already carried simple proteins in their saliva that helped weaken or slow the animals they bit. At first, these proteins did not function as true venom. They were mild and inconsistent, offering no guaranteed outcome. But evolution often begins with small steps. Over long stretches of time, the glands that produced these proteins became more specialized. The chemicals grew more varied, and the delivery system became more precise. Genetic studies in modern reptiles have revealed clues that reach far into the past. Venom is not a single substance. It is a collection of proteins that can affect nerves, blood, or muscle. The genes that produce these proteins belong to families that existed long before snakes themselves appeared. This means the foundation for venom likely emerged early in snake evolution, not as a sudden invention, but as a gradual expansion of traits already present in their ancestors. Some of these genes are shared with certain lizards alive today, showing that venom did not begin solely within snakes. Instead, it evolved across a wider branch of reptiles, becoming more refined as different lineages followed different paths. The earliest true snakes may have possessed only weak forms of venom, if any at all. Their bodies were already adapted for swallowing prey whole, and their environment offered opportunities that did not require chemical assistance. For millions of years, many early snakes continued to thrive without relying on venom, using stealth and constriction as their primary methods. The development of venom was not necessary for the survival of all snakes. It was one of several strategies that appeared when conditions made it useful. As time continued, some snakes began to evolve more complex venom glands. Instead of producing simple saliva, these glands contained tissues that could manufacture specific proteins for defense or hunting. The fangs of these early venomous snakes were not always hollow like the ones seen in modern vipers. They may have been grooved, allowing venom to flow along a shallow channel into a wound. This system was less efficient than the advanced delivery seen today, but it marked an important transition. It showed that venom had become more than a chemical byproduct. It had become a tool. Fossils cannot preserve venom itself, yet the shape of ancient skulls and teeth provide indirect evidence. Some Cretaceous snakes possessed elongated fangs positioned at the front of the mouth, similar to those used by modern venomous species. These snakes lived long after the earliest forms appeared, suggesting that venom evolved gradually and at different times across different groups. Not every lineage developed it to the same extent. Some retained only the simplest forms. Others expanded it into a complex system capable of stopping prey in moments. Even as venom increased in effectiveness, it was not always necessary for hunting dinosaurs. Most of the dinosaurs vulnerable to snakes were small or newly hatched. Their bones were delicate, and their bodies offered little resistance. A snake that relied on constriction or sudden stillness could subdue such prey without the need for chemicals. Swallowing a hatchling required patience, not poison. Venom would have provided little additional advantage in these early interactions. In many cases, venom is most useful when prey is dangerous enough to cause injury. Animals with claws, sharp teeth, or powerful limbs require a method that prevents struggle. For early snakes feeding on small reptiles, amphibians, or fragile young dinosaurs, the risk was often minimal. Their bodies were already suited for holding prey tightly and swallowing it whole. In this context, venom was not a requirement. It was an option that later became valuable for species hunting faster or more defensive animals. Venom also introduced challenges. Producing complex proteins requires energy. Maintaining specialized glands and fangs demands biological resources. Only snakes that benefited from venom kept it and refined it. Others lost these traits or never developed them fully. Evolution does not favor complexity for its own sake. It favors what works in a particular place and time. As the ancient world continued to change, many snakes that survived past the age of dinosaurs carried venom into new environments. Forests expanded and contracted. New prey species appeared with sharper reflexes and stronger defenses. In these shifting conditions, venom became more than a chemical tool. It became a way to hunt efficiently while reducing risk. Snakes that used venom did not need to struggle with their prey or expose themselves to injury. A quick bite allowed them to release and retreat, waiting until the animal became still. In the quiet timeline of snake evolution, venom was never a sudden or dramatic leap. It was a slow unfolding of possibility, shaped by genes that existed long before the first snake ever struck. Some lineages embraced it fully. Others continued to rely on patience, muscle, and silence. Together, these paths reveal that there was no single recipe for survival. The ancient world allowed many strategies to exist side by side, each shaped by the pressures and opportunities of its place and time. By the time early snakes learned to sense the world through vibration and scent, their bodies had already become instruments of quiet movement. They did not rely on limbs to guide them across the forest floor. Instead, every part of their body worked together, forming a continuous chain of muscles that flowed beneath the skin like a slow and steady current. This way of moving was not merely different from the animals around them. It offered advantages that shaped their role in the ancient world. Inside the body of a snake, the spine stretches from the base of the skull to the tip of the tail. It is made of hundreds of small vertebrae, each linked to the next by flexible joints. Along this backbone lie long rows of muscles arranged in overlapping bands. Some run the length of the body, others connect across short distances, anchoring one segment to another. When these muscles contract in coordinated waves, the entire body becomes capable of motion without the help of arms or legs. Unlike the quick strides of lizards or the heavy steps of dinosaurs, snake movement is smooth and continuous. The body presses gently against the ground, using friction and subtle shifts to push forward. This process is known as lateral undulation. It creates a rippling motion that passes from head to tail, not sharp or jerking, but fluid. Each curve allows the snake to push against rocks, soil, or vegetation. Even in places with no firm surface, such as loose sand or leaf litter, the body can adapt by widening its contact with the ground. Another form of movement, known as rectilinear motion, is even quieter. In this method, the snake does not bend from side to side. Instead, it lifts sections of its belly scales in tiny groups, moves them forward, and lays them down again. The muscles beneath these scales contract and release in alternating patterns. This creates a slow glide that leaves almost no trace. It is used by large snakes today when approaching prey or moving along narrow spaces. Early snakes likely used a similar technique when silence was essential. The body of a snake is supported by ribs that extend along nearly its entire length. These ribs are long and flexible, allowing the snake to expand while feeding, but they also play a role in movement. Each rib attaches to a group of muscles that can pull downward or outward. By activating certain groups while relaxing others, the snake can change direction, flatten its body, or lift slightly off the ground. This control turns the entire skeleton into a system for gripping the environment gently rather than striking it with force. In hunting, the absence of limbs became an advantage rather than a limitation. Most animals create sound when they move. Footsteps compress the soil. Branches snap beneath weight. Even light bodies disturb vegetation when lifted and lowered. A snake avoids these signals entirely. With no legs to lift, no feet to plant, its movement becomes nearly silent. The body spreads its weight across many points, reducing pressure in any one place. Leaves shift only slightly. Soil compresses without cracking. For a predator that depends on surprise, such quiet motion becomes a valuable tool. Limbless movement also allowed early snakes to enter places that other hunters could not reach. Crevices beneath roots, gaps under fallen logs, burrows abandoned by small mammals. Spaces too narrow for claws or paws to enter became natural pathways. Instead of chasing prey across open ground, a snake could position itself along an animal's regular route and wait. It did not need to close distance quickly. It only needed to be present at the right moment. This method of hunting proved especially effective near dinosaur nesting grounds. Eggs were laid in shallow soil or loose vegetation, creating networks of small spaces. Hatchlings emerged into a world where the ground was uneven and broken by roots. A creature with limbs would struggle to move quietly through such terrain. Twigs could break, loose sediment could shift without warning, but a slender body could weave through these obstacles without altering the environment. Approaching a nest required more than silence. Early snakes relied on their ability to remain still for long periods. Motion would attract attention from watchful parents or nearby predators. By pressing close to the earth and slowing their breathing, snakes became nearly invisible. Their coloration blended with soil and leaf litter. Their scales reflected little light. A waiting snake could remain unnoticed even when only a short distance away. When the time came to move closer, the snake advanced in tiny increments. The head remained low, guided by faint vibrations and scent. The body followed in gentle waves, never lifting high enough to cast a shadow. If a hatchling stirred within the egg, the snake would sense the change as a soft tremor through the ground. If the nest warmed under sunlight, the snake could detect the temperature shift long before the shell cracked. In many cases, the snake did not need to enter the nest fully. Remaining along the edge was enough. Hatchlings often moved outward after emerging, searching for cooler soil or shelter. A patient predator could take advantage of these moments without disturbing the nest itself. This strategy reduced risk. It avoided confrontation with protective adults and minimized the chance of alerting other predators. The ability to move without sound shaped the relationship between early snakes and their environment. Where other animals relied on speed or strength, snakes relied on stillness and subtlety. Their bodies became designed for quiet passage through a world where danger and opportunity existed side by side. In the deep shadows of ancient forests, this form of movement allowed them to survive without drawing attention, continuing their hidden lives beneath the footsteps of giants. In the world of the Mesozoic, daylight shaped the movements of the giants that dominated the land. Sunlight filtered through tall conifers and ancient ferns, warming the soil and guiding the rhythms of animals large and small. But when the sun slipped beyond the horizon and shadows stretched across the landscape, a different world emerged. Night did not erase life. It simply changed the rules. The length of day and night during the Mesozoic was not identical everywhere. Near the equator, where much of the warm and forested land existed, daylight remained fairly even throughout the year. The sun rose and set with gentle consistency, creating long periods of mild light followed by equally calm darkness. Farther from the equator, seasonal changes were more noticeable. Summers held extended days, while winters brought stretched nights. Yet even in these shifting regions, warmth lingered long after sunset. The air remained mild through much of the evening, allowing reptiles to stay active without losing heat too quickly. Night itself was not silent. In the forests, insects continued to hum and click beneath the leaves. Small mammals searched for food while avoiding the larger creatures that ruled the daylight hours. The darkness softened the noise of the world, but it did not stop movement. For many animals, nighttime offered safety. For others, it offered opportunity. Early snakes were well suited to this quieter world. Their bodies did not depend on large bursts of energy. They could remain still for long stretches, storing warmth gathered during the day. When the light faded, they did not suddenly slow or retreat. Instead, darkness became an ally. Vision mattered less in deep shade, and the senses that guided early snakes were already tuned to subtle cues. The flick of a tongue did not need brightness to gather information. Vibrations carried clearly through cool soil. A faint shift in temperature provided guidance even without color or shape. Unlike predators that chase their prey, early snakes did not require clear sight to succeed. Their hunting style was based on patience rather than pursuit. At night, when other animals relied on hearing and touch to navigate, snakes benefited from a world where sudden movements were rare. Each step taken by small dinosaurs or early mammals created gentle tremors that traveled through the ground. A snake pressed against the earth could read these signals long before the source came into view. Darkness also changed the behavior of many dinosaurs. Some species were active during the day, feeding on vegetation or searching for insects in open spaces. Others preferred twilight or night when the heat of the sun did not linger on their skin. Scientists study the shape of dinosaur eye sockets and the size of openings that supported the eyeball to learn how these creatures may have seen in different lighting. Dinosaurs with larger openings and wider surfaces for light-sensitive tissue may have been adapted for night vision. Among those likely to move after sunset were small, agile predators that hunted insects or tiny vertebrates. These dinosaurs relied on quick reactions rather than strength. They darted through undergrowth, using the cover of darkness to stay hidden from larger hunters. But their speed could not always protect them from a predator that did not need to chase. A snake wading along a well-traveled path required only a single moment when the world shifted in its favor. Young dinosaurs were especially vulnerable at night. Hatchlings entering the world shortly before dusk faced a landscape where shadows blended together and sounds became difficult to interpret. Their senses were still developing, and their movements were unsteady. Even species that grew into giants began life at a scale no larger than a small bird. They depended on the presence of adults or the safety of nesting grounds. Yet at night, even attentive parents could not monitor every direction at once. Herbivorous dinosaurs that fed during the cooler hours were also at risk. Many plant-eating species may have avoided the heat of midday, choosing instead to graze when temperatures fell. These animals moved slowly while searching for leaves and low branches. Their focus remained on feeding rather than scanning for hidden threats. For a snake positioned among roots or fallen branches, patience was all that was required. Nighttime did not simply offer concealment, it also reduced the effectiveness of certain defenses. Vision was limited, colors disappeared into muted shades. Even animals with good night vision could not detect every still shape on the ground. A snake that remained motionless became nearly impossible to distinguish from a fallen vine or narrow branch. The forest floor played a role as well. Moisture gathered at night, settling on leaves and soil. This softened sound, masking the gentle movement of scales against the ground. Cooler air reduced scents that might otherwise alert prey. In these conditions, the senses that guided early snakes became more powerful, while the senses used by other animals became less reliable. Not every dinosaur faced equal danger. Large theropods that hunted by day slept in protected positions, far too big for snakes to threaten. Massive sauropods moved as family groups, their sheer size discouraging any hidden predator. But small-bodied dinosaurs, young individuals still learning the landscape, and species that fed or nested during the darker hours lived in a world where quiet hunters waited beneath the surface. In the slow turning of ancient nights, early snakes did not dominate through force. They shaped their survival through stillness, using darkness as shelter rather than shield. While the daytime world belonged to creatures that towered above the ground, the night belonged to those that barely disturbed it at all. When we think of ancient snakes living alongside dinosaurs, it is easy to imagine them feeding only on small animals that wandered too close. Yet the bodies of early snakes held quiet possibilities far beyond what their size might suggest. Their ability to swallow prey whole did not come from strength alone. It was shaped by the structure of their skeleton, the stretch of their skin, and the patience of their digestion. To understand how large their meals could be, scientists study both fossils and the limits of modern snakes, using them as windows into a world where ancient predators tested the boundaries of what was possible. Modern snakes like anacondas and pythons offer useful comparisons. These species are known for swallowing prey that seems far too large for their bodies. An anaconda with a body thickness no wider than a person's arm can consume animals much broader than its own diameter. It achieves this not by stretching like elastic, but by shifting bones and muscles in coordinated patterns. The skull expands, the skin loosens, the ribs spread slightly, and the prey slowly disappears into the body. Ancient snakes did not reach the size of the largest anacondas, but their feeding structures worked in much the same way. To estimate how large prehistoric meals might have been, paleontologists begin with the bones of ancient snakes. A single vertebra can reveal the width of the body and the strength of the muscles surrounding it. By comparing these fossils with modern species of similar proportions, scientists can calculate the maximum size of prey that an ancient snake could swallow without injury. The general pattern remains consistent. A snake can usually consume prey that measures up to the widest part of its own body and sometimes more, depending on skull flexibility and stomach capacity. In prehistoric snakes, the lower jaw was not fused at the front. Instead, it was joined by strong but flexible tissue that allowed each half to move independently. This feature made it possible for the mouth to open wider than expected, increasing the range of prey that the snake could tackle. The skin along the body was not loose in appearance, yet it contained enough give to accommodate changes in shape. Scales overlapped rather than stretching, and the ribs shifted outward to create space. These adjustments worked together to allow the body to house a meal far larger than the snake's resting width. Stomach volume played an important role. The stomach of a snake is not a fixed container. It expands as needed, unfolding and lengthening to hold food that arrives whole. Once the prey is inside, digestion begins slowly. Acids and enzymes break down tissue over long periods, sometimes lasting days or even weeks. During this time, the snake remains mostly still, conserving energy and relying on stored heat to support chemical processes. Ancient snakes living in warm climates would have benefited from steady temperatures that allowed digestion to continue without interruption. Scientists studying digestion in modern pythons have observed that the heart rate can increase dramatically after feeding. Blood flow rises to supply the stomach with oxygen and nutrients needed for breakdown. The lining of the stomach thickens temporarily, and the liver and intestines become more active. These internal changes happen even in small snakes today, suggesting that ancient species likely experienced similar shifts. A single large meal could sustain a snake for long stretches of time, reducing the need to hunt often and lowering the risk of exposure to predators. Prehistoric snakes did not need to swallow adult dinosaurs to test their limits. Young dinosaurs, freshly hatched and still fragile, would have provided meals that were large in proportion but manageable in size. A hatchling sauropod, for example, might have been no bigger than a modern bird. For an early snake with a body several meters long, such prey represented a significant but realistic challenge. Scientific models suggest that an ancient snake of moderate size could swallow prey weighing several times more than its own head, as long as the body shape allowed passage through the mouth and throat. Modern anacondas show similar abilities. They can eat animals that appear nearly impossible for their size, including large birds, deer, and even small crocodilians. The comparison helps researchers understand prehistoric potential. While no ancient snake of the Mesozoic matched the immense scale of Titanoboa, which lived long after dinosaurs vanished, smaller ancestors still possessed the anatomical tools for ambitious feeding. Their meals were limited not by imagination, but by physics and patience. Digestion times varied depending on temperature and prey size. In warm and stable environments, food broke down more quickly. In cooler periods, the process slowed, and snakes became less active until digestion completed. Ancient snakes, living in shaded forests or near nesting grounds, may have chosen resting places that offered warmth from sunlight or geothermal heat. Remaining hidden during digestion would have been essential, since a snake carrying a large meal cannot move easily and loses the ability to escape quickly. By studying both fossils and modern species, scientists conclude that prehistoric snakes were capable of swallowing prey larger than expected for their body size. They did not need massive bodies to take impressive meals. They needed flexibility, stillness, and time. In a world where survival depended on quiet efficiency, these traits allowed ancient snakes to occupy a unique place in the food web, feeding not through forceful bites or tearing jaws, but through a method that transformed patience into possibility. In the vast and shifting landscapes of the Mesozoic, danger was often imagined as something loud and visible. Dinosaurs learned to watch the edges of forests for predators that moved with force and speed. They lifted their heads to scan the plains and listened for distant footsteps that signaled approaching threat. Yet the danger that came from early snakes did not announce itself. It waited in places where sight was useless and movement seemed harmless. Most dinosaurs never recognized the warning signs because the predator they feared least was the one they almost never noticed. Camouflage played a central role in this invisibility. Early snakes did not rely on bright colors or patterns meant to intimidate. Their survival depended on blending into the world that surrounded them. The forest floor was a patchwork of shadow and muted tones, covered in fallen leaves and fragments of bark. Soil shifted in shades of brown and gray, and the roots of ancient plants created natural lines across the ground. A snake's scales reflected these same patterns. Some carried subtle modeling, while others held a uniform tone that matched the places they rested. Unlike animals that relied on speed to escape, snakes used stillness as part of their disguise. Remaining motionless for long stretches required little effort. Their bodies did not rise and fall with heavy breathing. Their skin did not catch the light in sudden flashes. Even the shape of their bodies helped them disappear. Long and narrow forms mirrored branches, roots, or strips of fallen plant material. To an animal with eyes positioned for scanning movement rather than studying details, a resting snake was simply part of the landscape. Camouflage was most effective when paired with awareness of the environment. Early snakes did not position themselves randomly. They learned to rest along paths carved by small animals, near openings in vegetation where hatchlings emerged, and beside the edges of nests where young dinosaurs sometimes wandered. These places did not require pursuit. Opportunity came to them. Before striking, a snake needed more than concealment. It needed the right positioning. The body was arranged in gentle curves, never tight enough to reveal intention but ready to tighten if needed. The head remained slightly elevated, though not high enough to break the outline of the surroundings. The tongue flicked at slow intervals, gathering faint traces of scent without attracting attention. Every part of the snake's body was aligned for efficiency. Even the muscles beneath the scales relaxed to avoid accidental shifts. Pre-strike positioning also depended on distance. A snake could not afford to strike from too far away, where the movement would lose force and risk failure. It stayed close enough for accuracy, but not so close that its presence became apparent. Modern studies of snakes show that many strikes begin when prey is within a distance equal to 1/3 or 1/2 of the snake's body length. Early snakes likely followed similar patterns, relying on precise timing rather than reach. The physics of a snake strike is not explosive in the way it might appear. It is a controlled release of energy stored within the body. The muscles along the spine contract in a wave that begins near the tail and moves forward. This motion is guided by ribs and anchored by friction against the ground. Unlike animals that leap or lunge, a snake strike does not require leaving the surface. The body remains supported, allowing stability and speed to work together. The motion happens in fractions of a second. When the head moves forward, it follows a straight path, reducing air resistance. The jaws open just before contact, guided by flexible bones that allow the mouth to widen without slowing the strike. The impact is not blunt, it is precise, delivering teeth that curve backward and hold the prey in place. Once contact is made, the snake no longer needs speed. It relies on restraint and control. Physics also explains why prey rarely escaped. A strike begins with stored elastic energy held within the muscles and connective tissues. When released, this energy creates rapid acceleration. The faster the acceleration, the shorter the time window for the prey to react. Dinosaurs that relied on vision or hearing could not respond quickly enough. The strike occurred before their senses fully processed the movement. Even animals with quick reflexes faced a challenge. A snake's head reached its target long before the prey could shift its weight or attempt to retreat. After the strike, the world returned to stillness. Leaves settled, soil quieted. The snake did not need to drag its prey away or create commotion. It simply tightened its position or repositioned its grip, depending on its method of subduing the animal. A moment that would shape the outcome passed quietly, unnoticed by other creatures nearby. Most dinosaurs were not adapted to recognize such danger. Their attention was directed upward toward large predators, not downward toward the soil. Young dinosaurs lived in a world where threats came from the sky or from open ground, not from beneath their feet. Even adults, with size and strength on their side, rarely observed the small details that signaled a hidden predator. In the slow rhythm of ancient forests, early snakes succeeded not through power or speed, but through a mastery of the unnoticed. Camouflage kept them unseen, careful positioning kept them prepared. The physics of their strike ensured that, when the moment came, the prey had no time to understand what had happened. In a world ruled by giants, the silent hunter held an advantage that size alone could never grant. Not every threat that moved through the ancient nesting grounds came from scales and silence. Long before mammals rose to dominate the world, their earliest ancestors lived quietly beneath the shadow of dinosaurs. These small creatures were nothing like the ones we know today. They were tiny, warm-blooded, and cautious, living in burrows and hidden spaces where larger animals could not follow. Yet, despite their size, they played an important part in the delicate balance of life around dinosaur nests. They searched for the same food that snakes discovered, and in doing so, became competitors in a world where every advantage mattered. Early mammals were mostly nocturnal. Their bodies were small, often no larger than modern mice or shrews. Soft fur helped them maintain warmth during cooler nights, and sharp senses guided them through the dark. They fed on insects, seeds, and sometimes the eggs of reptiles and dinosaurs. Their teeth were far more complex than those of early reptiles. They could chew, slice, and crack open food that snakes could only swallow whole. This gave them access to resources that required breaking rather than waiting. The nesting grounds of dinosaurs drew these mammals with predictable regularity. During hatching seasons, the air carried new scents and sounds. Eggs warmed under sunlight or beneath layers of loose sediment, and hatchlings stirred before breaking through their shells. For a small mammal, a single unguarded nest could mean enough food to support its young. Mammals did not need to swallow their meals whole. They could take fragments, leaving behind broken shells that later became evidence in the fossil record. Snakes and mammals rarely confronted each other directly. Their methods and movements differed too greatly. Mammals relied on quick bursts of motion and delicate forelimbs that allowed them to dig, grasp, or climb. They entered nests by opening small holes or pushing aside loose soil. Their approach was often fast, guided by scent trails and the promise of warmth beneath the surface. Snakes relied on patience. They did not break shells or steal partially developed embryos. Instead, they waited for hatchlings to emerge. This difference shaped the competition between the two groups. Mammals sought the stillness of eggs, while snakes focused on the moment life began to move. Even so, both predators depended on the same locations and the same periods of abundance. In ecological terms, they shared a resource. When two species depend on the same limited food, competition becomes unavoidable, even if silent. In some nesting sites, evidence shows a mixture of broken eggs and unbroken ones, suggesting that mammals arrived first, leaving behind scattered fragments. In other places, hatchlings appear in fossil layers alongside remains of snakes, hinting that both predators visited the same ground but at different moments. Competition shaped the behavior of early snakes in subtle ways. Snakes could not dig with limbs or break through thick nesting layers, so they positioned themselves at the edges where movement was more likely. They learned to avoid direct conflict by relying on timing instead of force. When mammals raided nests early, snakes benefited from the disturbance. A broken egg might release a scent that guided a snake toward potential prey. Mammals, without knowing, sometimes made the environment easier for another predator to use. Temperature played a role as well. Mammals were able to remain active during cooler hours because they generated their own heat. Snakes depended on warmth stored during the day. To conserve energy, they spent more time waiting rather than searching. This difference allowed both predators to feed without overlapping constantly. Mammals moved quickly across nesting grounds, taking small opportunities in brief visits. Snakes occupied the same area for longer periods, blending into the scenery until a hatchling came within reach. The body structure of snakes also provided a distinct advantage. Their long, slender forms allowed them to enter tight spaces beneath roots and fallen branches without altering the surroundings. A mammal might leave tracks or disturb loose soil, alerting nearby adults. A snake could rest beneath the surface without leaving any evidence at all. Its presence depended on stillness rather than speed, reducing the chance of detection. As environments shifted through time, some regions offered more resources than others. In places where food was scarce, competition between snakes and mammals may have been intense. Only those able to exploit narrow opportunities survived. In richer ecosystems, both predators could coexist with less conflict, each taking different parts of the same resource. Natural selection favored snakes that specialized in hatchlings rather than eggs. This narrow focus reduced competition and allowed snakes to succeed even when mammals were abundant. Over millions of years, these differences helped snakes carve out a niche that remained distinct from their mammalian rivals. They did not need to replace mammals or chase them away. Instead, they adapted to the moments mammals could not use. Where eggs remained untouched until hatching, snakes waited. Where mammals moved too quickly to notice the small tremors beneath the soil, snakes listened. Their success came not from claiming more, but from needing less. In this quiet balance, both groups shaped the history of dinosaur survival in ways that left no loud mark on the landscape. Each belonged to the same hidden world, competing without confrontation, guided by different strengths. And in the spaces where their paths overlapped, the ancient Earth carried the traces of two small predators, sharing the same fragile beginning of life. The world of the Mesozoic did not stay the same from one age to the next. Temperatures rose and fell in long and gentle cycles, shaping the lives of the creatures that depended on warmth to survive. For early snakes, these shifts were not simply changes in weather. They created conditions that allowed a quiet lineage to grow stronger, spread farther, and explore new possibilities in the hidden spaces of ancient Earth. During several warm periods, the atmosphere held heat for long stretches of time. Winters were mild in many regions, and summers remained steady rather than extreme. Reptiles rely on external warmth to fuel their bodies. When sunlight lingers and the air stays warm through the night, their metabolism increases. Muscles respond more quickly. Digestion becomes more efficient. Energy is stored rather than lost. For snakes that often remained still while waiting for prey, this stability offered a powerful advantage. They could hunt without needing to bask for long hours and digest large meals without risking weakness from sudden cold. Warm periods also reduced the danger of nighttime temperature drops. Earlier in the story, we followed snakes moving through the quiet world after dark, using stillness to approach their prey. In cooler climates, such behavior would have been difficult. A reptile loses heat quickly when temperatures fall, but during certain stretches of the Mesozoic, the evenings remained warm enough for snakes to stay active long after sunset. This allowed them to widen their hunting hours and find opportunities that other predators could not use. The composition of the atmosphere shifted as well. While oxygen levels during the Mesozoic did not reach the dramatic peaks seen in more ancient eras, they experienced periods of moderate increase. Even subtle rises in oxygen can influence life on a broad scale. Higher oxygen supports more productive ecosystems. Plants grow more rapidly. Insects become more abundant. Herbivores benefit from richer vegetation, and their young appear in greater numbers. Each step in this chain creates more potential prey for predators positioned at its edges. For snakes, which require steady but low amounts of energy, such abundance meant that their method of survival was well supported. They did not need to chase large animals or compete with fast-moving hunters. Instead, they relied on environments where life was dense and movement constant. Small reptiles, early mammals, and young dinosaurs all flourished when oxygen and warmth worked together to expand the food web. As the climate warmed, forests responded on a global scale. In the early Cretaceous, flowering plants began to spread across river valleys and lowland plains. Their arrival did not transform the landscape overnight, but over millions of years they created new layers of vegetation. Shrubs, vines, and low leafy growth filled spaces that once held mostly ferns and conifers. This increased the number of shaded corridors near the ground. For a snake, more shade meant more protection. The soft cover of leaves and young plants offered shelter that did not exist in earlier times. Forests did not only become thicker, they also expanded across wider areas. Rising sea levels flooded coastlines, creating humid conditions that encouraged plant growth. Wetlands formed along ancient shores and river deltas. These environments produced warm, stable microclimates. They supported nesting sites for dinosaurs and provided habitats rich with amphibians, insects, and small vertebrates. Snakes that lived in these regions found both safety and food in close proximity. As vegetation spread, the ground beneath the forest canopy changed. Fallen leaves accumulated in deep layers, creating soft soil that held moisture and muted sound. This allowed snakes to move even more quietly than before. The earth beneath them stayed warm for longer periods, storing heat absorbed during the day. A snake resting beneath the litter could remain hidden and still maintain the body temperature needed for digestion and movement. The expansion of forests also changed visibility. Light filtered through branches in broken patterns, creating shadows that shifted slowly with the wind. For animals that relied on sight to detect threats, these shifting shapes made it difficult to notice subtle outlines. A snake lying along a root or beneath a cluster of leaves became nearly impossible to distinguish from the environment. Camouflage, already effective in earlier landscapes, became even more powerful. Climate shifts affected water as well. Increased rainfall in certain regions created temporary streams and shallow pools. These water sources attracted small animals and young dinosaurs searching for moisture. Snakes waiting along the edges of drying puddles could find prey without traveling far. As wetlands expanded and contracted with seasonal changes, new opportunities emerged every time the water retreated. Not all changes were beneficial. Periods of extreme heat or drought could challenge even the most well-adapted reptiles, but the long, warm intervals of the Mesozoic created more openings than obstacles. Snakes did not become dominant predators, yet these conditions allowed them to grow in number and spread into new territories. They occupied the quiet spaces beneath forests, along riverbanks, and within fertile plains where life gathered. The slow transformation of climate, atmosphere, and vegetation did not shape snakes through force. It guided them gently, offering environments where patience and stillness could succeed. As forests deepened and warmth settled across the land, early snakes found themselves in a world that matched their quiet nature, allowing their hidden lineage to endure and evolve in the shadows of the age of giants. In a world ruled by animals that stood taller than trees and weighed more than moving boulders, early snakes lived at the edge of danger. Their bodies were small and silent, but silence alone could not guarantee safety. The same landscapes that offered shelter beneath roots and fallen branches also held the heavy footsteps of giants. To survive, snakes developed strategies that did not rely on strength or intimidation. They survived by staying unnoticed, by reacting with speed at the right moment, and by using the land itself as protection. Large dinosaurs did not hunt snakes intentionally. Their eyes and instincts were focused on threats closer to their own size. Yet a creature that lived close to the ground faced risk not from planned attacks, but from chance. A single misplaced step could crush a snake instantly. A heavy tail sweeping across the soil could injure anything beneath it. Even small movements from giant bodies created sudden changes in the environment. Dust shook loose, roots shifted under pressure, the ground trembled with every motion. Snakes adapted to these dangers not by meeting them, but by avoiding them. They spent much of their time where giant bodies could not reach. Narrow spaces beneath vegetation, deep layers of leaf litter, and gaps formed by tangled roots provided refuge. The shape of their bodies made these spaces useful. A snake did not need to push branches aside or widen an opening. It simply flowed into the empty spaces already present in the landscape. Larger animals could not follow, and many never knew the snake was there. One of the most effective strategies was burrowing. Not all ancient snakes were capable of digging, but many used existing tunnels created by other animals. Early mammals and small reptiles carved out networks of underground pathways as shelter from predators and extreme temperatures. Snakes found these ready-made spaces and used them without altering their shape. A shallow depression beneath a rock or a hollow beneath a fallen tree root could serve as protection for days. Some early snakes developed bodies suited for pushing through loose soil. Their skulls were smooth and narrow, allowing them to press forward beneath the surface. Scales on the head and snout formed a natural shield, preventing abrasion from dirt and small stones. Each movement was subtle. The snake did not dig like a mammal using paws and claws. Instead, it pressed and wriggled, parting the soil with slow persistence. Once inside, the surrounding earth offered safety. Sound was muted. Temperature remained stable. The world above could shift without affecting the snake beneath. Burrowing also allowed snakes to avoid detection by predators that hunted using sight. Large theropods scanned open spaces, searching for movement across the ground. But the world below the surface held no visible motion. For a snake, using this layer of the environment was not only a way to hide, but a way to survive the unpredictable presence of giants. When remaining hidden was not possible, snakes relied on rapid escape. Their bodies, though slow in ordinary movement, were capable of sudden bursts of speed. These bursts did not resemble the sprint of a mammal or the leap of a lizard. Instead, the entire body shifted in a single coordinated wave, propelling the snake forward in a swift glide. This motion allowed it to move away from danger before a larger animal could react. Rapid escape depended on muscle structure. Along the spine, overlapping muscles attached to wide ribs. When these muscles contracted all at once, the snake could accelerate quickly across the ground. Even short distances mattered. Moving only a few body lengths could place the snake beneath cover or inside a crevice where a larger predator could not follow. The motion looked effortless, but it was the result of a body designed for sudden change. Some snakes used a form of movement that lifted parts of the body slightly off the ground while maintaining contact elsewhere. This created minimal friction and allowed quick redirection. If a shadow approached or vibrations signaled danger, the snake could shift direction without turning its entire body. Modern snakes use similar techniques when escaping from threats, suggesting that this behavior emerged early in their evolution. Coloration provided another layer of defense. While camouflage helped snakes remain unseen during hunting, it also protected them from being noticed by larger predators. A snake that matched the ground beneath it was less likely to draw attention when resting or moving slowly, even when escaping. Its low profile and muted coloring made it difficult to track. The body did not rise above vegetation or cast a noticeable shadow. It slipped through the landscape without leaving a clear visual trail. Snakes also benefited from their ability to remain still for long periods. Many predators detect prey through movement. A creature that freezes becomes part of the background. Early snakes used this behavior not only as hunters, but as survivors. If a large dinosaur passed nearby, the snake did not flee immediately. It waited, relying on stillness and silence until the danger moved away. Only when the ground grew calm again did it continue its path. Survival did not require confrontation. It required awareness. Snakes listened through the earth for distant footsteps. They smelled changes in the air long before they saw anything. They reacted to danger not with aggression, but with subtle decisions guided by senses tuned to the quietest signals. In a world of towering forms and tremendous force, early snakes found safety by using the spaces others ignored. They survived not because they were strong, but because they understood the ground beneath their bodies and learned to share it with giants without being caught beneath their weight. Through patience, shelter, and swift retreat, they continued their hidden lives, carrying their ancient lineage forward. Through the age of dinosaurs, as the Cretaceous period unfolded, the world grew thicker and more vibrant than ever before. Forests that once held mostly conifers and ferns transformed into dense green realms filled with new kinds of plants. Flowering species spread across warm lowlands and river valleys, bringing color and fragrance to ancient air. These forests did not appear suddenly. They expanded slowly, year by year, seed by seed, until wide stretches of land became shaded worlds where sunlight reached the ground in thin, scattered patterns. The trees of these superforests were tall and closely spaced. Their branches formed layered canopies that filtered the light into soft patches. Beneath them, shrubs and broad leaves grew in tangled clusters. Vines twisted between trunks, creating natural curtains that shifted gently with the wind. The ground was covered in deep layers of fallen leaves that softened every sound. Even the air felt different. Moisture lingered beneath the canopy, keeping the soil cool and damp throughout the day. Insects hummed continuously, and the scent of plant resin drifted through still pockets of shade. In this kind of landscape, movement changed its meaning. Large dinosaurs that once traveled across open plains now pushed slowly between trees, leaving narrow paths behind them. Smaller animals stayed close to hidden spaces, using roots and low plants as cover. Light rarely reached the forest floor without interruption, and colors faded into muted greens and browns. For a creature that depended on staying unseen, these conditions were perfect. Early snakes did not need to alter their behavior to fit this new world. The forests seemed built for them. Their long and slender bodies matched the shapes of vines, sticks, and fallen branches. Their scales reflected only small amounts of light, making them blend easily with soil and leaf litter. Even when a snake moved, the motion was slight and gentle. It slipped forward without disturbing the plants above it. In a place where shadows moved more than animals did, a resting snake became nearly impossible to notice. The structure of the vegetation created natural hiding places. Thick roots formed hollows at the bases of trees. Leaf piles concealed shallow depressions in the soil. Ferns and shrubs created low arches where a snake could rest without being exposed. Unlike open environments, where predators relied on distance and clear sight lines, the superforests replaced visibility with closeness. A predator could be only a short distance away without ever being recognized. These forests also shaped the way snakes hunted. Ambush depended on stillness, and stillness was easier when the world remained shaded and cool. Snakes positioned themselves along small animal pathways that crossed beneath the plants. They waited beside fallen logs, softened by decay. They rested near patches of ground warmed by narrow beams of sunlight, knowing that young reptiles and small dinosaurs often paused in such places to warm themselves. Vegetation did more than conceal snakes. It slowed their prey. Small dinosaurs that lived among the trees could not run freely as they did in open terrain. They stepped carefully around branches and roots, lifting their feet over tangled stems. Hatchlings newly arrived from nests often hesitated before moving forward, unsure of the shapes around them. Each pause made them more vulnerable to predators that did not reveal their presence. The thick plant cover also reduced sound. Leaves cushioned the footsteps of small animals, but they also masked the motion of a waiting snake. When a predator and its prey are both quiet, success often belongs to the one that does not need to move first. Early snakes used this balance to their advantage. They did not search for prey across large distances. They waited for the forest to bring life into reach. Fossil evidence from these environments is rare because forests are not ideal places for preservation. Soft soil and dense roots disturb layers before they can harden. Fallen leaves decay quickly, and moisture breaks down bodies before sediment can cover them. Even so, paleontologists have uncovered remains from regions that once held Cretaceous forests. In parts of India, Brazil, and Myanmar, fossils reveal small snakes preserved alongside plant material and tiny vertebrates. Some specimens show delicate bones curled within ancient sediments, suggesting that these snakes lived and died in shaded habitats rather than open ground. Other fossils provide indirect clues. The presence of certain plants, pollen grains, and insect fossils indicates that snakes shared these forests with creatures that preferred deep cover. The size and shape of vertebrae from these snakes suggest bodies suited for tight spaces rather than long-distance travel. Their ribs and skulls match the features of species that relied on ambush instead of pursuit. Although these fossils cannot show behavior directly, their anatomy aligns with the demands of life in dense vegetation. The growth of superforests also influenced where snakes could spread. Rivers and floodplains created corridors of greenery that stretched across continents. As plants expanded, snakes followed. They moved into new regions without needing to adapt drastically because the forest floor offered similar conditions in many places: moist soil, filtered light, abundant hiding spaces. A world where patience remained a successful strategy. In these ancient forests, life unfolded quietly beneath towering branches. Large dinosaurs passed overhead without noticing the small predators that shared their path. Insects filled the air with constant vibration, and young animals moved carefully among the roots. Early snakes continued to do what they had always done, but the world around them changed in a way that made their methods even more effective. The superforests did not create snakes, but they allowed them to flourish in the deep and gentle shadows where few eyes ever looked. By the time snakes settled into the quiet understory of the Mesozoic world, their bodies carried a feeding strategy unlike anything around them. They did not tear their meals or chew them into smaller pieces. They did not rely on claws or gripping limbs. Instead, every part of their head and mouth evolved into a system that worked together with patience and precision. To understand how these ancient snakes fed, we have to look closely at the details that seem small, yet change the possibilities of life beneath the feet of dinosaurs. The teeth of early snakes were not large or imposing, but their shape mattered far more than their size. Each tooth curved gently backward, forming a natural hook. This curvature worked like a series of tiny anchors. When prey tried to pull away, the teeth guided it forward instead of allowing escape. The more the animal struggled, the deeper the teeth held. Unlike the sharp slicing teeth of many predators, snake teeth did not cut or crush. They acted as gripping tools, securing the prey without breaking it apart. These curved teeth lined the upper and lower jaws in rows that pointed inward. Even the angle of each tooth supported the same purpose. A forward motion offered no resistance, but a backward motion met a barrier. This simple design allowed snakes to move prey deeper into the mouth, using slow, steady adjustments rather than force. In modern snakes, this pattern remains unchanged, suggesting that the mechanism developed early and proved useful for millions of years. The skull played an even greater role. Unlike the rigid skulls of most reptiles, snake skulls were built from many small bones connected by flexible joints. This flexibility allowed different parts of the head to move independently. The upper jaw could shift slightly without affecting the lower jaw. Sections of the palate, hidden inside the mouth, could glide forward and backward. These movements might seem subtle, but together they allowed the snake to adjust its grip without releasing the prey. One of the most remarkable features was the unfused lower jaw. In many animals, the two halves of the jaw meet at the front as a single solid piece. In snakes, they were linked by strong but elastic tissue. This connection gave each half the ability to move separately, widening or narrowing the mouth depending on the shape of the prey. When a snake opened its mouth, the lower jaws spread apart, creating space that seemed impossible for the size of the head. The movement did not rely on dislocation, as often imagined, but on natural motion supported by ligaments that could stretch and return to place. Inside the skull, other adaptations supported feeding. The bones that anchored muscles were positioned to maximize control rather than strength. When a snake held its prey, it did not clamp down with crushing force. Instead, it used a method known as the pterygoid walk, where the bones of the upper mouth moved forward in tiny alternating steps. One side gripped while the other advanced. Then the process repeated. This allowed the prey to move deeper into the throat without the snake needing to push with its body. The process of anchoring prey began long before swallowing. Once the snake struck or seized its target, the first goal was to secure a hold. This did not require immediate movement. The teeth created a firm grip, and the muscles of the jaw tightened just enough to prevent escape. If the prey continued to struggle, the snake adjusted its head, finding a position where movement could be controlled. Even without limbs, the snake managed its hold with surprising precision. In many cases, the snake wrapped part of its body around the prey, not always to constrict, but to stabilize. Anchoring the body prevented twisting or shaking that might threaten the grip. Once the prey became still or stopped resisting, the snake began the slow process of swallowing. The head tilted slightly to one side. The jaws opened wider than expected. and the alternating motion of the skull bones guided the prey forward. Muscles in the throat expanded and contracted in waves, drawing the meal inward. This method had several advantages in the ancient world. It allowed snakes to feed on prey larger than would be possible for animals that needed to chew. It reduced the risk of losing food during a struggle. It also minimized movement, which helped the snake remain hidden while feeding. In a world with larger predators nearby, staying unnoticed during a vulnerable moment was essential. As the prey moved deeper, the body made room in gradual stages. The ribs spread slightly to accommodate the shape. The skin did not stretch like rubber, but shifted to distribute pressure evenly. Digestion began even before swallowing was complete, with stomach acids preparing for work that would continue for days. These feeding mechanisms did not evolve all at once. They developed slowly as snakes adapted to a lifestyle that depended on quiet success rather than force. Each change made the process more efficient. Each improvement allowed snakes to take advantage of opportunities that other animals ignored. In the shaded world beneath ancient forests, this method of feeding became a perfect match for the environment. Snakes did not need to chase their food or overpower it. They relied on structure, patience, and the subtle cooperation of bones and muscles. Their feeding strategy was not dramatic, yet it allowed them to thrive in a world where survival favored those who moved softly and took only what they needed from the hidden spaces of the earth. Every ancient snake began its life in a world that did not yet notice it. Hidden beneath soil, vegetation, or the shadows near nesting grounds, a new hatchling entered the Mesozoic landscape as a creature no longer than a fallen twig. Its body was delicate, its scales soft, and its movements unpracticed. Yet even in this fragile stage, the young snake carried within it all the quiet potential that would guide its future. Growth in snakes did not unfold in sudden leaps. It happened slowly, shaped by temperature, food availability, and the rhythms of the environment. Like modern reptiles, early snakes relied on warmth to fuel their development. In seasons when sunlight remained steady and the air held heat long into the night, hatchlings grew more quickly. Their bodies absorbed energy from each small meal, converting it into new muscle and bone. During cooler intervals, growth slowed, allowing the young snake to preserve what little energy it possessed. A hatchling's diet reflected its size and limitations. With a body no wider than a finger, it could not attempt prey with thick limbs or hard shells. Instead, it fed on animals small enough to swallow without struggle. Tiny amphibians, hatchling lizards, insect larvae, and soft-bodied invertebrates formed the foundation of its early diet. Each meal was a careful opportunity. The young snake moved cautiously, avoiding the attention of larger animals that might mistake it for prey. As the snake grew, its body changed gradually. The jaws became more flexible, and the ligaments that supported feeding strengthened. Muscles along the spine thickened in layers, providing greater control and stability. The scales grew firmer and took on patterns that blended more easily with the surrounding ground. With every passing month or season, the hatchling became better suited to silence and survival. Growth was not only a matter of size, it influenced behavior. A very small snake spent much of its time concealed, relying on stillness to avoid being eaten. As it became longer and stronger, the snake could expand its range. It explored new microhabitats within the forest floor, using spaces that were inaccessible when it was more fragile. This gradual shift reduced its vulnerability and opened opportunities for new prey. Diet changed alongside size. Once the snake reached a length that allowed it to handle slightly larger animals, it began to hunt young vertebrates rather than insects alone. Small reptiles became part of its diet, followed by amphibians that moved through damp soil after rainfall. With increasing confidence, The snake learned to take advantage of moments that required patience rather than speed. A young dinosaur that wandered away from its nest or paused beneath vegetation could become a potential meal for a snake that had reached the appropriate size. Scientists studying modern snakes have noted that growth does not occur at a constant rate. Periods of steady expansion are followed by pauses that allow the body to stabilize. Ancient snakes likely experienced the same pattern. After consuming a larger meal, the snake could go days without feeding, using the energy to grow new tissue. This slow cycle helped maintain balance between risk and reward. A snake that ate too frequently might expose itself to danger while still digesting, but one that fed in measured intervals remained hidden and efficient. As the snake approached maturity, its relationship with the world changed again. A larger body allowed access to prey that was once too difficult to swallow. The jaw could open wider, and the stomach could stretch farther. The rib cage became more flexible, and the muscles that supported swallowing grew stronger. With these physical changes came a shift in prey selection. Instead of hunting very small animals, the snake could target slightly larger ones, including young dinosaurs that had grown beyond their earliest days but remained small enough to handle. Size also influenced hunting strategy. A small snake depended on concealment alone. A larger snake could use part of its body to stabilize prey during feeding, even without full constriction. It did not need to chase. It simply took advantage of opportunities that matched its strength. As the snake continued to grow, each feeding event supported longer intervals between meals. This rhythm allowed it to conserve energy and reduce exposure to predators. Not all snakes reach the same final size. Some remained small throughout their lives, relying on insects and tiny vertebrates. Others grew into impressive lengths, becoming predators capable of swallowing animals that would have been unimaginable at their birth. Environmental conditions played a part. In regions with abundant warmth and food, snakes could grow more quickly and achieve greater size. In harsher landscapes, growth remained slow, and survival depended on frugality rather than expansion. Reaching adulthood did not mark the end of change. Snakes continued to grow throughout their lives, though at a slower pace. Each year added a small amount of length and mass, shaping the body into a more capable hunter. With age came experience. The mature snake understood where prey appeared most often, how to wait without wasting energy, and which risks were worth taking. Throughout these growth stages, the relationship between size and prey remained tightly connected. A hatchling could not hunt what an adult snake could, and an adult did not rely on the tiny meals of its youth. Each stage supported the next, allowing the snake to survive in a world filled with creatures far larger than itself. Quietly, steadily, the small hatchling that once blended into the soil became a predator that shared the ancient landscape with giants, yet never needed to challenge them to endure. As ancient snakes continued to grow and explore their quiet place in the Mesozoic world, a turning point arrived in their relationship with the creatures around them. Small meals like insects and amphibians remained part of their lives, but as some snakes reached greater sizes and strength, a new opportunity appeared at the edges of nesting grounds. Young dinosaurs, newly hatched and unsteady, entered the landscape in large numbers. Their arrival created a moment that nature rarely overlooks, a moment when the gap between fragile beginnings and hidden predators briefly aligned. Modern reptiles offer gentle clues to what may have happened long ago. Today, many snakes do not pursue adult animals. Instead, they wait near places where young or weakened prey are likely to appear. Pythons rest beside burrows used by newborn mammals. Certain colubrids linger near nests of ground-nesting birds. Even small garden snakes take advantage of newly hatched amphibians when they leave the water for the first time. These behaviors are not driven by aggression. They are shaped by efficiency. A young animal requires less effort to subdue, and for a snake that must swallow its food whole, reducing risk is essential. Ancient snakes likely followed similar patterns. They did not need to chase young dinosaurs across open terrain. They positioned themselves where movement was predictable. Dinosaur nests were often placed in shallow depressions or gently elevated mounds of soil and vegetation. Some species nested in large colonies where many individuals laid eggs at the same time. Others built simple nests and left them unguarded. These habits created brief windows when many hatchlings emerged together, filling the environment with small bodies that had not yet learned the rhythms of survival. The vulnerabilities of dinosaur hatchlings were numerous. When they first broke through their shells, their bones were delicate and their muscles only beginning to develop. Vision and balance improved over time, not instantly. Some species were precocial, able to walk soon after hatching, but even these young animals faced difficulty recognizing threats that did not move or tower above them. Most relied on instinct rather than experience. They paused frequently, unsure of which direction offered safety. Their small size made them easy to swallow, and their movements drew attention to the ground rather than the sky. The world around them offered little protection. Tall grasses and low plants could hide them briefly, but these same plants also hid predators. The forest floor was uneven and full of shadows. A hatchling that stepped into a patch of light became exposed. One that remained in shade could wander close to a resting snake without noticing. The sounds made by newborn dinosaurs were soft and rhythmic, easily carried through soil and leaf litter. A snake pressed against the ground could sense these faint vibrations long before the hatchling reached the surface. Not all. Interactions between snakes and young dinosaurs are based on speculation. Fossil evidence provides rare but remarkable confirmation. One of the most well-known examples comes from India, where paleontologists uncovered a scene frozen in sediment. The fossil preserved a young sauropod still curled inside its nest, and beside it lay the remains of a snake. The snake's body was positioned in a loose coil, its head near the hatchling as if waiting or reacting in the final moment. The surrounding sediment showed no signs of violent disturbance. Instead, the scene appeared quiet, as though time had captured an instant before anything fully unfolded. This discovery did not show a snake swallowing a dinosaur, but its placement revealed behavior. The snake was not merely passing through the area, it was close enough to interact with the hatchling, suggesting deliberate positioning near the nest. The fossil also showed multiple eggs nearby, indicating that the snake may have been attracted to the site for more than one opportunity. Such a find supported the idea that snakes recognized nesting grounds as places of advantage, not coincidence. Other fossil sites add subtle support. In regions where small snakes and dinosaur eggs are found together, researchers note patterns in the sediment that hint at repeated visits. Eggshells appear broken in ways not caused by natural collapse. Small vertebrate bones are discovered near nesting layers without signs of scavenging from larger predators. While these clues cannot speak with certainty, they align with known behavior in modern reptiles and suggest that ancient snakes took advantage of the same ecological openings. The relationship between snakes and young dinosaurs was not defined by dominance. It reflected the quiet balance that shapes many ecosystems. Snakes did not threaten the survival of dinosaurs as a whole. They participated in the natural cycle, taking only what their size and method allowed. The number of hatchlings produced by many dinosaur species was high, suggesting that only a portion were expected to survive into adulthood. In this context, snakes filled a role shared with early mammals, birds, and other small predators that fed on the youngest lives without altering the fate of the giants themselves. As ancient snakes grew and matured, their ability to target young dinosaurs did not depend on aggression or power. It depended on stillness, awareness, and the careful use of opportunity. In the soft light of the Cretaceous forests, hatchlings took their first steps into a world filled with possibility. And nearby, beneath the leaves and soil, a patient predator waited without sound, shaped not by force, but by the delicate timing of life that moves quietly at the edge of sight. Once an ancient snake finally swallowed its meal, the most delicate part of survival began. In the quiet world beneath the forests and nesting grounds, feeding was only the beginning. What happened inside the body determined whether the snake would thrive or suffer. Unlike many predators that tore their meals apart before eating, early snakes carried the entire burden of digestion within a single long and narrow pathway. Every muscle, every chemical, and every moment of stillness worked together to transform a whole animal into energy. Inside the body, the first stage began within the throat as the prey moved slowly downward. Muscles contracted in smooth waves, guiding the meal toward the stomach without the need for chewing or tearing. The shape of the prey still remained recognizable at this point. A young dinosaur or small reptile passed into the stomach largely intact. Only when it reached this chamber did the real process begin. The stomach of ancient snakes behaved like a powerful chemical chamber. Its inner lining secreted acids strong enough to dissolve bone, muscle, and connective tissue. Modern snakes produce hydrochloric acid at concentrations far higher than many other vertebrates, and scientists believe that their ancient relatives shared similar abilities. Alongside these acids, enzymes flowed into the stomach to break down proteins and fats. These enzymes acted like tiny tools, each one designed to dismantle a different part of the meal. The strength of the stomach did not remain constant. In periods when a snake had not eaten for some time, its stomach became less active. Producing acid required energy, and ancient snakes did not waste resources when food was scarce. Only when a meal was swallowed did the stomach awaken. Blood flow increased, and the digestive organs expanded in response. Within a short time after feeding, the metabolic rate of the snake rose dramatically, sometimes multiplying several times above its resting state. The body entered a phase of intense internal activity, even though the snake remained still on the outside. Digestion of a large meal took time. For smaller prey, the process might have lasted several days. For something larger, like a young dinosaur, digestion could continue for more than a week. The snake did not move much during this period. Its body became heavier and less flexible, making escape more difficult. Remaining hidden was essential. The snake often found a sheltered location, such as beneath roots or within loose soil, and stayed motionless while its stomach worked. Inside the stomach, the meal softened gradually. Bones weakened and began to dissolve. Soft tissues broke apart first, followed by tougher structures. The ribs of the snake spread slightly to accommodate the changing shape as digestion continued. The digestive system did not simply break down the prey, but absorbed nutrients in stages. Proteins became amino acids, fats transformed into energy reserves. Minerals from bones entered the bloodstream and contributed to growth. The intestines played a quiet but important role. After the stomach completed the initial breakdown, the partially digested material passed into the intestines, where absorption took place. The inner surface of the intestines contained folds that increased the area available for nutrient transfer. This design allowed the snake to gain the most value from each meal. Very little was wasted. Even the smallest components were reused to build new tissue or fuel the body through periods without food. One of the most remarkable adaptations of ancient snakes was their ability to survive long intervals between meals. Because they consumed prey that provided large amounts of energy at once, snakes did not need to feed often. After completing digestion, the metabolic rate dropped again. The organs that had expanded during feeding returned to a resting state. The heart slowed, and the digestive tract became quiet. The snake could then enter a period of fasting that lasted weeks or even months, depending on temperature and energy reserves. During these fasting periods, the body conserved resources with great efficiency. Muscles did not waste energy through unnecessary movement. Water loss was minimized. The snake relied on stored fat to maintain vital functions. This ability allowed ancient snakes to survive in environments where prey was unpredictable. They did not depend on frequent hunting. Instead, they lived through cycles of abundance and scarcity with calm resilience. Fasting also protected them from the dangers of moving while vulnerable. Carrying a large meal inside the body made the snake more noticeable. Remaining hidden until digestion was complete reduced risk from larger predators that shared the same landscape. This strategy also prevented injuries that might occur if the snake attempted to escape while encumbered. The digestive process served another purpose. By extracting as much energy as possible from each meal, ancient snakes supported steady growth throughout their lives. A young snake that swallowed its first vertebrate meal gained more than nourishment. It gained the foundation for stronger muscles, longer bones, and greater ability to handle future prey. Every large feeding event shaped the body further, reinforcing the connection between diet and development. In the quiet depths of the Mesozoic forests, digestion was a slow and hidden miracle. No sound marked its progress. No visible movement revealed the transformation taking place within. A snake could remain still for days while its body completed the work. When it finally emerged from its resting place, lighter and more flexible once again, nothing remained of the meal that sustained it. Only the energy carried forward, allowing the snake to continue its life in a world where patience and efficiency guided survival more than strength or speed ever could. When the age of dinosaurs came to its silent close, the world did not change in an instant. The great extinction that marked the end of the Cretaceous unfolded in waves that touched every corner of the Earth. Forests thinned, temperatures shifted, food webs collapsed and slowly rebuilt themselves. The giants that once shook the ground with their footsteps disappeared, leaving behind a planet that felt strangely open and waiting. In this quiet new chapter, the snakes that survived found themselves in a world unlike the one they had known. The extinction removed many of the large predators that once dominated the landscape. Without these towering competitors, new spaces opened within ecosystems. Small and medium-sized animals became more common, filling roles that had once been occupied by dinosaurs. Early mammals multiplied in number, spreading into environments they could not access before. In the absence of giant reptiles, no single group shaped the world's food chains. Instead, life reorganized slowly, guided by opportunity rather than dominance. For snakes, this shift brought unexpected advantages. During the Mesozoic, they lived in the shadows of creatures far larger than themselves. Now, with those giants gone, snakes could expand their range and feeding options. The climate that followed the extinction did not remain cold for long. Over time, warmth returned, especially near the equator. In certain regions, temperatures rose higher than those seen in the age of dinosaurs. Warmth favored reptiles, allowing their metabolism and growth to increase. This created conditions that supported larger bodies, provided that food remained available. One region in particular became a cradle for reptile gigantism. In what is now northern South America, vast wetlands formed during the Paleocene period. These wetlands stretched across what would later become Colombia and nearby areas, creating a landscape filled with swamps, slow-moving rivers, and dense vegetation. The air carried heavy humidity, and temperatures remained warm throughout the year. Such conditions provided perfect support for cold-blooded animals that relied on external heat to power their bodies. Within these wetlands, life flourished. Giant turtles swam through shallow waters. Crocodile relatives grew longer and more robust. Fish reached lengths that dwarfed many modern species. The abundance of large prey created an environment where a snake could grow far beyond the sizes achieved in earlier ages. It was in this setting that Titanoboa emerged. Titanoboa was not a sudden invention of nature, but the result of a long lineage that stretched back into the Mesozoic. Earlier snakes had already developed flexible jaws, muscular bodies, and silent hunting strategies. These abilities did not disappear after the extinction. Instead, they formed the foundation for new possibilities. Titanoboa did not need to reinvent its body to become a giant. It only needed the right environment to expand upon traits that had been present for millions of years. The connection between Titanoboa and its Mesozoic ancestors can be traced through shared features: the structure of the vertebrae, the arrangement of muscles along the spine, and the pattern of curved teeth all reflect a history that began long before the Paleocene. What changed was scale. Titanoboa reached an estimated length of more than 40 feet, making it the largest snake known in the fossil record. Its size did not result from aggression or competition, but from stability. In an environment that offered warmth and abundant prey, a large body became not only possible, but advantageous. The wetlands where Titanoboa lived were dense and slow-moving. Shallow waters created places where a massive snake could glide with little effort. Unlike dry landscapes, swamps reduced the strain of supporting a heavy body. The water carried some of the weight, allowing Titanoboa to move without exhausting itself. In this setting, the snake could approach prey quietly, using both patience and strength. Large fish became a primary food source, and the ability to remain submerged helped Titanoboa avoid detection. The rise of Titanoboa also reveals something about the resilience of snakes as a group. While many species vanished at the end of the Cretaceous, snakes continued forward with adaptations that allowed them to survive scarcity. Their ability to fast for long periods, consume large meals, and hide within small spaces protected them during difficult times. When the world recovered, snakes were ready to take advantage of new opportunities. Titanoboa did not last forever. As the climate continued to change, temperatures gradually cooled. The conditions that once allowed such enormous reptiles to thrive slowly disappeared. Wetlands shrank, and forests changed in structure. With these shifts, the era of giant snakes faded. The descendants of Titanoboa returned to smaller sizes, better suited to the evolving world. Yet the story of Titanoboa is more than the tale of a giant predator. It reflects the way life responds to change, not with certainty, but with quiet persistence. After the fall of the dinosaurs, the earth did not remain empty. It grew into something new, and among the first to rise in that transformed landscape was a snake that carried the ancient past within its body, while stretching into a future that no creature of the Mesozoic could have imagined. Long before Titanoboa appeared in the world, ancient snakes shared their landscapes with creatures far larger than themselves. The Mesozoic was not a single story of dominance, even though dinosaurs often stand at the center of the imagination. It was a network of relationships that stretched across forests, rivers, coastlines, and open floodplains, with each species filling a place that supported the balance of life. To understand where snakes belonged within this vast system, it helps to picture the ancient food web as a layered tapestry rather than a simple chain. At the highest levels stood the great predators, including large theropods that hunted other dinosaurs or scavenged when opportunities arose. These animals shaped their surroundings through strength and size. Below them existed a broad middle tier made up of smaller carnivores, omnivores, and opportunistic feeders. Early mammals, Certain lizards, small theropod dinosaurs, and crocodile relatives moved quietly through this level. They hunted insects, eggs, small reptiles, and newborn animals. Beneath all of them, almost invisible in the daily rhythm of life, were creatures like ancient snakes that relied on silence and timing rather than force. Snakes did not compete with the giants of their time. Their ecological role was built on precision. They occupied spaces that larger predators could not reach, such as burrows, deep leaf litter, root tangles, and narrow gaps between rocks. By taking prey that was small but abundant, they helped regulate populations of animals that reproduced in large numbers. This role kept the lower levels of the food web from expanding beyond what the environment could support. In this way, snakes contributed to stability without ever needing to control the system. Many of the animals that shared the environment with ancient snakes also depended on small prey. Early mammals, for example, fed on insects and eggs and sometimes competed with snakes at nesting grounds. Small predatory dinosaurs, such as feathered species related to birds, hunted similar targets. Crocodile hatchlings fed on invertebrates and fish before growing into larger hunters. Despite this overlap, ancient snakes avoided direct conflict by relying on strategies that other predators did not use. Their limbless bodies allowed them to move silently through spaces where even the smallest dinosaurs could not fit. They could wait for long periods without detection, using very little energy. These qualities allowed snakes to slip into the food web without disrupting it. The predator-prey dynamics of the Mesozoic were shaped by scale. Large predators focused on large prey, not because smaller animals were unimportant, but because larger meals offered more energy in a single effort. Smaller predators hunted what they could handle, and each group influenced the world in different ways. Snakes fitted into this structure by targeting animals that were often overlooked. They fed on eggs, young, reptiles, amphibians, and hatchling dinosaurs, taking advantage of stages in life when many creatures were naturally vulnerable. This approach prevented snakes from depending on dangerous interactions. They did not need to challenge adult dinosaurs or risk their lives for meals beyond their capacity. Instead, they used the predictable patterns of reproduction and movement. When nesting seasons arrived, certain areas filled with food. When amphibians gathered in damp places after rainfall, the ground came to life with motion. Snakes recognized these cycles and returned to the same places year after year, forming a quiet link between the environment and its smallest inhabitants. Snakes were not alone in these roles. Early lizards hunted insects with quick movements. Mammals used agility and sharp senses to locate eggs and small vertebrates. Even some birds of the late Mesozoic, with their lightweight frames, searched for similar food sources. Yet snakes stood apart in one significant way. They could consume prey whole, even when it was larger than expected for their size. This ability reduced waste and allowed snakes to survive longer between meals. In ecosystems where food availability changed from season to season, such efficiency was an advantage. Their place in the hierarchy was also shaped by how they avoided becoming prey. Larger dinosaurs rarely noticed snakes unless movement drew attention. For this reason, snakes relied on stillness, camouflage, and underground shelter. By remaining unseen, they reduced pressure on themselves and maintained their role without conflict. Their survival depended more on being overlooked than on dominance. As ecosystems shifted over millions of years, the position of snakes stayed consistent. They never rose to the level of top predators, but they were never pushed to the edges either. Their presence influenced the survival of countless small animals, and in turn, those small animals influenced the survival of larger ones. A healthy population of insects supported small reptiles and mammals. Those animals supported the diets of mid-sized predators. In subtle ways, snakes helped maintain these layers by preventing any single group from growing unchecked. In the broader view of the Mesozoic world, snakes were part of a system that valued balance rather than power. Their quiet role connected the smallest lives to the largest ones, forming a thread that ran through forests and nesting grounds across millions of years. They lived not by challenging the rulers of their time, but by understanding the spaces left unclaimed, moving gently through them, and allowing the ancient world to remain whole. For all their quiet skill and remarkable adaptations, ancient snakes lived within boundaries they could not cross. Their bodies allowed them to swallow prey larger than almost any other animal of similar size, yet this ability had limits that nature never allowed them to escape. In the world of the Mesozoic, those limits shaped what snakes could hunt and what remained forever out of reach. The first limitation was size. Even the largest snakes of the Mesozoic and the ages that followed were small beside the adult dinosaurs that shared their environment. A full-grown sauropod could weigh many tons. Predatory theropods towered above the forests and walked with strides that covered the distance of a small clearing in a few steps. No snake, no matter how flexible its jaws or how strong its muscles, could attempt such prey. Swallowing required that the prey fit within the diameter of the snake's body, not just its mouth. This single rule created a clear boundary that no ancient snake could cross. Even young snakes faced the same constraint. Their bodies did not break apart the animals they swallowed. They relied entirely on the slow movement of prey through the throat and into the stomach. This meant that anything too wide would stop the process before it began. Adult dinosaurs had thick limbs, rigid skeletons, and chest structures that could not compress. Attempting to swallow such a body would not have been possible. The snake would risk suffocation or injury long before digestion could start. A second limitation involved energy. Swallowing large prey required enormous effort. Modern snakes show that the process can raise body metabolism to many times the resting level. Ancient snakes likely experienced the same challenge. A meal that was too large could cause overheating in warm climates or exhaust the snake's energy before digestion finished. Taking smaller prey reduced risk and allowed the snake to retreat to safety more easily. This helped preserve the balance between feeding and survival. Strength also played a role. Although many ancient snakes were capable of powerful strikes or constriction, they were not built to overpower animals weighing hundreds of times more than themselves. Constriction works by slowing circulation and preventing movement, not by crushing bones. A large dinosaur's body was too massive for such a method to succeed. Even if the snake attempted to hold an adult dinosaur, the struggle would end dangerously for the snake long before the dinosaur was affected. These limitations reveal why ancient snakes focused on prey that matched their capabilities. Young dinosaurs, small reptiles, amphibians, and eggs made sense within these boundaries. They were abundant, accessible, and within the physical limits of what a snake could swallow. The fossil record supports this pattern. Evidence of snake and dinosaur interaction appears only with hatchlings or very young individuals. There are no fossils showing snakes attacking fully grown dinosaurs, and scientists do not expect such evidence to exist. Yet misconceptions still appear in stories and artwork. Modern imagination often portrays giant snakes wrapping around adult dinosaurs, pulling them to the ground, or swallowing them whole. These images overlook the physical reality of both animals. Dinosaurs were not fragile giants. Their bones were thick, their muscles powerful, and their size alone created protection that no snake could overcome. Even predators built for hunting large dinosaurs relied on teeth, claws, and coordinated movement. A snake's body was designed for a different purpose. Another misconception is that snakes could dislocate their jaws to swallow anything. In truth, their jaws remained connected by ligaments that stretched, not by joints that separated. The flexibility of the skull allowed the mouth to widen, but the limit remained tied to the width of the prey. Ancient snakes used this system effectively, yet it never allowed them to eat beyond what their bodies could support. There were also environmental limits. Many snake species lived in habitats where adult dinosaurs rarely traveled. Burrows, root systems, and low vegetation offered shelter, but these spaces were not paths for giant animals. Snakes lived in hidden layers beneath the dominant world above. They adapted to life in the shadows rather than challenging the rulers of their time. These boundaries were not weaknesses. They were part of the design that allowed snakes to succeed for millions of years. Instead of competing with enormous predators, snakes filled smaller roles that remained stable through shifting climates and changing landscapes. Their survival depended on precision rather than power, and patience rather than confrontation. By understanding what ancient snakes could not eat, their role becomes clearer. They were not hunters of giants, but specialists of the overlooked. Their world was built from narrow spaces, quiet moments, and prey that most other animals ignored. This niche protected them from direct competition and allowed them to endure events that reshaped the planet. The giants of the Mesozoic left deep footprints in the earth. Snakes left no marks of such scale, yet their presence remained just as enduring. Their limitations did not diminish their place in the ancient world. Instead, those limits shaped a survival strategy that continues today, long after the last dinosaur faded from the forests where small predators once moved unheard beneath the leaves. In the long story of Earth, most of what once lived vanished without leaving a trace. Bones weathered away, soft bodies dissolved into soil. Countless moments unfolded and disappeared, unseen and unrecorded. When we picture ancient snakes moving through nesting grounds or waiting beneath forest shadows, it is tempting to imagine that these scenes must exist somewhere in stone. Yet the fossil record tells a quieter truth. Predation, even when common in life, is nearly invisible in death. For a moment of hunting to become a fossil, a chain of unlikely events must occur. First, both predator and prey must die close together in time. This seldom happens in nature. Most animals survive their encounters or escape wounded. When a predator succeeds, it usually removes the prey from the scene entirely. A snake that swallowed a young dinosaur did not die beside it. It digested the meal in hiding, leaving no evidence behind. Even the bones of the prey dissolved within the body, leaving nothing for the ground to preserve. Second, the environment must protect remains from disturbance. Scavengers, weather, and flowing water scatter bones long before burial. In forests, the soil churns with insects and roots. On floodplains, water moves sediment and sweeps material away. Only in places where sediment accumulates quickly is there a chance for preservation. A layer of fine silt or volcanic ash must fall at the right moment, covering bodies before they break apart. Most landscapes do not offer such protection. Because of this, nearly all interactions between ancient snakes and dinosaurs disappeared before they could reach the ground in one piece. Even when burial occurs, the conditions must favor fossilization. Minerals in groundwater must replace organic material slowly enough to preserve shape, but not so slowly that decay destroys the remains first. Temperature, acidity, and pressure must align in delicate balance. If any part of this balance shifts, the remains dissolve or flatten into unrecognizable fragments. The fossil record is not a complete archive of ancient life. It is a fragmentary collection shaped by chance. The rarity of predation fossils becomes clearer when we consider how animals interact with their surroundings. Scenes that capture behavior are the rarest of all. A skeleton lying alone tells us that an animal once lived. It does not tell us how it moved, hunted, or died. To record an interaction, two lives must overlap at exactly the moment when preservation begins. This is why fossils showing animals in the act of feeding are almost unknown. They freeze not only bodies, but time. Among the very few examples, the Sanajay fossil stands apart. Discovered in India, this specimen preserved a young sauropod hatchling within its nest, and beside it lay the remains of a snake positioned in a loose coil. The scene captured more than bones. It held a moment that had not yet unfolded completely. No violent struggle marked the sediment. The hatchling remained close to its eggs. The snake's head rested near the body as if waiting. A sudden event, perhaps a collapse of sediment caused by a nearby movement or a rapid flood of sand, buried both animals before either could escape. The uniqueness of the Sanajay fossil lies not only in what it preserved, but in how unlikely its preservation was. The nesting site needed to remain undisturbed until the moment of burial. The sediment had to fall quickly, yet gently enough to preserve delicate positions. The bodies had to remain in place long enough for mineral replacement to begin. Any change in timing would have erased the scene. This is why paleontologists value the fossil so deeply. It provides a rare window into behavior that would otherwise be known only through inference. Biases in the fossil record create further gaps in our understanding. Animals that lived in dry upland areas rarely fossilized because erosion carried their remains away before burial. Those that lived near water had a greater chance of preservation, not because they were more common, but because sediment covered them more readily. Small animals also faced disadvantage. Their bones were thin and fragile, easily crushed or scattered. Snakes fall into this category. Their skeletons consist of many small vertebrae that separate quickly after death. Unless burial occurs almost immediately, the body disarticulates and disappears. Behavior leaves even fewer traces. A nest may preserve eggs, but not the predators that visited it. Scratches or bite marks may fade before fossilization. If a snake swallowed a hatchling, digestion removed evidence long before the snake died. Only indirect signs remain, such as clustered eggshell fragments or unusual bone arrangements. These clues suggest interaction but cannot confirm it. Because of these limitations, the fossil record feels like a quiet whisper rather than a full account. It favors animals that died in the right places, at the right times, under the right conditions. It preserves structure more readily than action. It records stillness more easily than motion. What we know about ancient snakes and dinosaurs comes not only from rare discoveries, but from reasoning built on patterns, comparisons, and the small fragments that survived by chance. Even so, the silence of the fossil record does not diminish the reality of ancient life. It reminds us that most stories unfold without witnesses. The world of the Mesozoic was filled with interactions that will never be seen in stone. Snakes fed beneath roots and leaves. Hatchlings took their first steps and vanished into the undergrowth. Only a tiny fraction of these moments remained. The rest drifted into the past, leaving the earth to remember them in ways that stone could not. Even though the snakes that lived alongside dinosaurs disappeared long ago, pieces of their story remain alive in the world today. Modern snakes carry traces of the past not as echoes, but as living habits shaped by the same pressures that once guided their ancient relatives. By watching them move, hunt, and survive, scientists can glimpse behaviors that first took shape millions of years before humans ever appeared. In many cases, the closest clues come not from the largest or most dramatic snakes, but from species that work quietly in familiar environments. These snakes are not direct descendants of any single ancient line, yet their bodies and behaviors reflect solutions that nature discovered long ago and never abandoned. They serve as living analogs, allowing researchers to understand how ancient snakes might have navigated the world without needing to imagine details from nothing. One example can be found in pythons. These snakes rely on slow and careful approaches rather than speed. They position themselves near paths used by small animals, waiting for the moment when movement draws close enough to strike. Their muscles create steady pressure when holding prey, and they release only when stillness has returned. This method is not about force alone. It is about patience, timing, and the ability to conserve energy while remaining ready for action. Early snakes that lived beneath the feet of dinosaurs likely depended on similar strategies, using stillness as their greatest advantage. Other species reveal different aspects of ancient behavior. Sand boas spend much of their lives hidden beneath loose soil. They expose only their eyes and snout, allowing them to watch without being seen. When prey approaches, the strike is short and precise, followed by rapid retreat into the substrate. This method helps protect the snake from larger predators and reduces the need for long pursuits. Fossils suggest that some ancient snakes lived in similar environments, using burrowing as a way to survive in landscapes filled with much larger animals. Tree-dwelling snakes offer yet another window into the past. Some species, such as green tree snakes and certain vipers, rely on their bodies to anchor themselves among branches. They move slowly, using careful balance rather than ground-based locomotion. Their strikes are directed downward or outward, taking advantage of gravity and positioning rather than distance. Although most early snakes were thought to live close to the ground, small fossil details hint that some species may have explored multiple layers of ancient forests. Observing modern arboreal snakes helps scientists understand how flexibility and muscle control evolved to allow movement in narrow spaces. Even the way modern snakes sense their surroundings provides insight into behaviors that may have begun in deep time. Many species do not rely primarily on vision. Instead, they collect chemical information through their tongues, tasting the air in small, steady flicks. Others detect faint vibrations along the ground, allowing them to sense footsteps long before anything appears. These abilities help modern snakes locate prey without revealing their presence. Early snakes that shared the earth with dinosaurs had similar sensory tools, though not always as advanced. Watching how modern snakes use these senses helps researchers imagine how ancient snakes found food and avoided danger in worlds filled with sound and movement. Some modern species still target vulnerable animals in ways that parallel ancient opportunities. Rat snakes, for instance, raid bird nests with surprising skill. They climb with slow, silent movements, using their bodies to secure balance as they approach. Once they reach the nest, they rely on precision rather than force. This behavior mirrors what fossil evidence suggests about ancient snakes that approach dinosaur nests without causing disruption. Although the prey and environment have changed, the strategy remains recognizable. Even digestion reflects ancient patterns. Large modern snakes can go long periods without food after swallowing a significant meal. During this time, their bodies slow their metabolism and rest, while internal processes continue unseen. Ancient snakes that swallowed young dinosaurs likely relied on similar rhythms, remaining hidden while digestion occurred. Studying how modern snakes manage energy helps scientists understand how their ancestors survived in environments where food appeared in brief but important moments. What modern snakes teach us is not that the past can be recreated exactly. Instead, they show that certain solutions in nature endure because they work across different worlds. The ability to move without announcing presence, to wait rather than chase, and to take advantage of predictable moments does not belong to any one time period. These strategies emerged because they allowed snakes to thrive in landscapes dominated by creatures much larger than themselves. The stories held by modern snakes do not replace fossils, they add depth where stone remains silent. When a python coils beneath fallen leaves or a sand boa disappears into soil, the behavior is not merely modern, it is part of a long thread that reaches back to a world that no longer exists. Through these living animals, the ancient past continues in quiet and recognizable ways, allowing us to see that extinction does not erase every trace of what once was. Instead, some lessons remain alive, carried forward in the bodies of creatures that still move gently through the hidden spaces of the earth. As scientists uncovered the first clues of ancient snakes interacting with dinosaurs, the discoveries did more than reveal a rare moment in prehistory. They quietly reshaped how paleontologists understood life in the Mesozoic, especially the roles played by animals that rarely appear in the spotlight. Before these findings, snakes were often imagined as recent arrivals in Earth's timeline, small and unimportant in comparison to the giants that ruled the land. The fossil evidence changed that view. It showed that snakes were already complex, adaptable, and woven into ancient ecosystems in ways no one expected. These discoveries encouraged researchers to re examine long standing assumptions. Instead of seeing the Mesozoic as a world defined only by enormous predators and towering herbivores, scientists began to appreciate the hidden layers beneath. The presence of snakes in nesting grounds suggested that smaller animals shaped the environment with just as much influence, although in subtler ways. The idea that early snakes fed on young dinosaurs did not rewrite the history of extinction or dominance. It simply revealed that the ancient world was more interconnected than once believed. The Sonage fossil in particular sparked a shift in thinking. It offered direct evidence that snakes were not passive observers of the Mesozoic world, but active participants in ecological networks. The scene preserved in stone showed behavior rather than isolated bones, and behavior is the rarest insight the fossil record can give. After this discovery, paleontologists began searching for traces of interaction in places previously overlooked. They paid closer attention to sediment layers in nesting sites and examined small vertebrate fossils with greater care. The possibility that more such scenes might exist prompted new approaches to fieldwork and analysis. Advancements in technology deepened this change in perspective. Modern tools allowed scientists to extract information from fossils without damaging them. CT scanning became one of the most valuable methods. By creating detailed three-dimensional images of fossilized skulls and vertebrae, researchers could study internal structures that were once impossible to observe. In early snakes, this revealed how bones fit together to create flexible skulls and how sensory regions of the brain developed. Such insights helped confirm ideas about feeding mechanics, movement, and evolutionary relationships. Microfossil analysis also opened new windows into the past. Instead of focusing only on large bones, paleontologists began examining fragments of teeth, scales, and eggshells preserved in fine sediment. These small traces often appear in places where complete skeletons do not. Through this method, scientists learned more about where early snakes lived and how widespread they were. Tiny remains found near ancient nesting grounds supported the idea that these areas attracted not only dinosaurs, but a variety of small predators. The ground became a record of activity rather than a silent surface. Chemical analysis added another layer of understanding. By studying the composition of fossilized tissues and surrounding sediments, researchers could infer temperature ranges, diets, and environmental conditions. These tools helped reconstruct the climates that supported early snake evolution, revealing that warm environments encouraged growth and sensory development. This supported the broader view that reptiles responded closely to changes in temperature and habitat structure, both in the Mesozoic and beyond. Even with these advances, many questions remain. The fossil record shows only fragments of snake history, leaving large stretches of time without documentation. Scientists do not yet know when certain key features evolved, such as extreme jaw flexibility or early forms of constriction. The origins of venom are also uncertain. Genetic studies suggest that venom-related proteins developed in ancient reptile lineages, but direct fossil evidence is rare. Whether early snakes used venom at all, and in what form, remains unclear. Another unanswered question concerns diversity. The number of snake species that existed in the Mesozoic is still unknown. Fossils show only a small sample, and many species likely lived in environments where preservation was unlikely. Wet forests, sandy soils, and upland regions rarely captured remains. It is possible that early snakes occupied a wider range of habitats than the fossil record suggests, including areas far from nesting sites or forest edges. Researchers also continue to explore how snakes spread across different continents. The Mesozoic world was shaped by shifting landmasses. As continents separated, species evolved independently, creating lineages that may never be fully traced. Some fossils hint at early dispersal routes, but the exact pathways remain a puzzle. Each new discovery helps fill small gaps, yet the overall picture is still emerging. Despite these uncertainties, the lasting impact of these findings is clear. They transformed ancient snakes from background creatures into important figures in the study of prehistoric life. They reminded scientists that even the smallest animals influence ecosystems in ways that matter. Most of all, they expanded the frame through which we view the past, showing that the history of Earth is not only written in the bones of giants, but also in the delicate traces left by those who moved silently beneath them. As research continues, the story of ancient snakes remains open, shaped by patience and curiosity. New technologies will reveal more details, and future discoveries may change what is known today. For now, the work of paleontology moves forward gently, guided by the understanding that even a single fossil can shift the way we see an entire world. Across the long stretch of deep time, the world beneath ancient forests held stories that rarely made a sound. While enormous dinosaurs cast their shadows across floodplains and fern-covered valleys, another kind of life moved quietly in the spaces they never noticed. Snakes did not shape the Mesozoic world through strength or size. They shaped it through presence, patience, and the subtle influence of survival carried out in silence. It is easy to imagine history as something written only by the largest creatures, yet the earth has always been guided by those who lived close to the ground. The first ancient snakes were small enough to slip beneath roots and vanish between stones. Their lives did not leave great footprints or towering skeletons. Instead, they left traces measured in delicate bones, faint patterns in sediment, and the evolutionary threads that still run through the bodies of modern species. These quiet predators took part in a world that continues to surprise us, not because they dominated it, but because they were part of its hidden balance. Throughout this journey, we followed their story from the moment they first appeared in the late Jurassic through the evolution of limbless movement, jaw flexibility, and sensory precision. We watched them grow from hatchlings into hunters capable of swallowing prey that once seemed impossible. We learned how they navigated ancient forests by night, visited nesting grounds where young dinosaurs emerged into uncertain light, and survived by waiting rather than chasing. Each chapter revealed that the world was never ruled by giants alone. It was shaped by small creatures that worked in quiet partnership with the landscape. Even after the age of dinosaurs ended, snakes continued forward. In the warmth of Paleocene wetlands, their descendants reached astonishing sizes, proving that transformation does not always mean replacing the past, but extending it into new forms. The rise of Titanoboa showed that survival belongs not only to the strongest, but to those who adapt with patience and resilience. And today, modern snakes still carry ancient behaviors within them. Their movements, hunting strategies, and hidden lives remind us that the past does not disappear completely. It lingers in the patterns of living creatures that move softly through our world. The story of ancient snakes also asks us to look at history differently. Paleontology is not only the science of giants, it is the science of everything that once lived, including the small animals that rarely appear in textbooks or museum halls. Without them, ecosystems would collapse. Without them, evolution would not have unfolded in the same way. The Earth is shaped not only by dramatic events, but by quiet ones repeated over millions of years. Each soft movement beneath the leaves mattered, even if it was never seen. As we close this chapter together, I would love to hear your thoughts. What surprised you most about the world where snakes hunted dinosaurs? Did any part of their story change the way you imagine ancient life? If you have theories, questions, or ideas about what might still be hiding in the fossil record, share them in the comments. This peaceful little corner of science grows through curiosity, and your voice is part of it. If you enjoyed drifting through deep time tonight, a gentle like on this video helps others find their way here. And if you would like to join future journeys into forgotten worlds, you are warmly invited to subscribe. Each time you return, we will explore another mystery with the same calm wonder, letting the past unfold softly, one quiet moment at a time. Now, before we part for the night, take a slow breath, let your shoulders relax. The ancient world may feel far away, but its stories still flow beneath us like roots beneath the soil. Thank you for sharing this peaceful journey into the lives of creatures that once slipped unseen through prehistoric forests. Until next time, sleep gently, stay curious, and let the quiet mysteries of our world guide you into rest.